Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. We're having a virtual meeting today as per pandemic and the provincial order. So it's just myself and the clerk in council chambers, and up in the balcony are two deputy clerks taking minutes and looking after our Zoom connection. Just a reminder that there's no final decisions will be made here today. Any motions will be recommendations that will go to the May 18th council meeting for further discussion if needed, or a final decision. So we'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask for a motion adoption of the agenda as amended. And it's as amended, additional agenda items for May 4th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Item 5.1. Additional correspondence relating to the off-road vehicle use of city roads task force recommendations from Grace and George, and correspondence from Jim and Susan Clifford. Also adding item 7.1.1 under deputations relating to the off-road vehicle use of city roads task force recommendations. Peter Petrozoniak, including supplemental reference material. Heather Stobel, including supplementary reference material. William Steffler, also including supplementary reference material. Leslie Barrett and John Spears are all doing deputations as well. So if I can get a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Councillor Elmsley, seconded by Councillor Yeo. Any questions? Call the question. All in favor? That motion's passed. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move right into deputations. We're doing it a little bit differently today. We have a deputation, our first deputation, but I just want to remind everyone that we have 8 deputations today, so out of respect for each other, I'm going to ask you to limit your deputations to 5 minutes. It's very important just based on the time, so we have lots of time for discussion. I do not want to cut you off of your presentation, but I will. So please do your best to keep your presentation to 5 minutes. We're going to deal with one deputation and then correspondence, and then I want to deal with the presentation from the ORV task force and our staff, and then we'll do the deputations after the presentation regarding the off-road vehicle use of city roads and the task force recommendations. So I thought everybody could hear the presentation first before we do that. So with that being said, item 4.1, our first deputation is a concern regarding the condition of the road at Front Street West and West Drive in Bobcaygeon. Mr. Richard Hill and a Colin Campbell. Are you there, gentlemen? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can hear you. You can hear me. I'll turn it over to you. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's Richard Hill. I live on Front Street West, and Bobcaygeon, been here for a couple of years. We've noticed that the intersection at Front Street West and West Drive has deteriorated quite a bit over the last few years, and the cold patch that they've been putting on just does not seem to be working. So I've been getting together with all the neighbors, see what we can do about this. I noticed on the website we're not on the 5-year plan to fix this intersection, and I don't think it's going to last 5 more years. So we went ahead, we did a petition on our street, and I got a letter of support from the residents' home there on West Street. A lot of people walk down to the water from there. So this will be, we couldn't get it into you guys because we had an issue with my scanning and the clerk's fax machine. So we'll get that into you as soon as we can, before the next meeting. I think it was the 18th or something. And the only other thing I wanted to add was, when I was getting these signatures a week and a half ago or so, there was a lady on a scooter trying to get back to the old folks' home, and she was stuck in the middle of the road. She was afraid that she was going to tip over. And one of our West Street residents went out and helped her, so she didn't, she probably wouldn't have tipped over, but she thought she was gonna. And I think that our seniors that live in that home and on our street deserve better than that. Anyways, I'll let Campbell continue on.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for hosting us to speak to you today. Rick gave you an overview. I'm sure you've read the letter that went in as well. There'll be more to follow with the petition. But I want to address the other parts of Front Street West. It's not just the junction with West Street. Councillor Fagan, Cassie kindly came out to see what we're talking about. We have a few problems along the road, and at the far end where we both live at the west end, it's a turning type circle which is being badly deteriorated, which as the asphalt gets moved, it gets filled in with water. We've got flooding, and I especially and my neighbour, we have flooding right onto our lot, about, I would say, a good 50, 60 feet onto my lot from the street. So it's right underneath an old cabin we have on the property. Obviously that in winter time then is causing a lot of difficulties for us. So we'd like to ask for a couple of things. One is if we can liaise with an engineer right on site here to discuss the situation with him, to see if we can come up with some timelines, not just for West Street as well, but for the end of the street here, to somehow come up with a storm water management situation, either some sort of French drain, or I understand there's an empty lot beside the Water's Edge, isn't it? Yeah, Water's Edge cottages on the north side, which we had heard that somebody had suggested we turn that into a stormwater management pond, and we're not that far away from there, which we could drain into that to prevent the flooding up here. It's definitely getting worse as the trucks are turning all the time. And we know we're not on the 5-year list, but I think we've been moved up from what we understand on the life cycles, and I know what a life cycles is, so we appreciate that very much. But initially I suggested that we also have quite a large development taking place behind the nursing home on West Street. This, I think in a total of somewhere around about 240, 260 houses eventually, and the first phase is 70 something houses. And there's an entrance from West Street and one from Front Street West, and they have already dug up the road to connect sewers, water, etc., to Front Street for the new development, which is fine. And they've actually covered it with gravel a couple of times, and it's not in such a bad shape. They respond quite well. However, in the very near future, they're going to have to asphalt all the roads in that subdivision and the repair on West Street as well, where they connected the sewers. So I was suggesting that we piggyback with them, because I know how much municipalities are charged for these things on tenders. It's absolutely out of sight. It's ridiculous. It's 4 or 5 times what the normal price should be. And I think there could be some cost savings there if we can get together and liaise with them, one of your staff, and award a sole source contract to the same guy doing the asphalt up in the new development. I think the savings for taxpayers there, and we move up as well on the life cycle situation without impeding maybe other opportunities across the city who are in the same boat as us. And we know that the roads in certain places are not great, and we know the winter is very impactful on it. So anything we can do, Rick and I are prepared to meet the engineering at any time. We're willing to answer any questions and see if we can come up with a plan, and just see if that is an opportunity to piggyback with their asphalter on that site. I know it's been done in other places before, and it's something prudent use of our taxpayers' money. And that's about all. Unless you any questions for us, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. I'll ask council for a motion to receive the deputation, and we'll see if there's any questions. Moved by Councillor Seymour Fagan, seconded by Councillor Dunn. Any questions for the deputants regarding their deputation? Councillor Seymour Fagan, go ahead.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Both Rick and Colin are correct that I came down and met with them, and I have spoken to engineering, both Mike and Juan, in regards to this, to see if we can add it to the lifestyle extension. And I've spoken to Juan about coming out and meeting with them to have a look and see what's going on with this piece of roadway, because at the corner at West and Front, I don't think that the gentleman actually explained what's there. There's also a boat launch, and now that we're down boat launches at the park, it's going to be heavily used as well. So I wanted to thank them for being proactive in getting this together for us. Yeah, and that's it. I'm looking forward to working together with them.
Thank you. Any other questions for the deputants? Seeing none, we've got a motion to receive. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. Councillor Seymour Fagan, are you looking at any kind of a follow-up motion, or are you satisfied that your meeting and your direction with staff will deal with the issues as they need dealt with? Because I've been through the area, I do agree it's a pretty tough stretch on that intersection there, but I'm hearing that you've already made some of the arrangements. So do you want to do any kind of follow-up, or are you satisfied that you're good to go?
I'm satisfied, but you know what? Just for the record, maybe we should do a follow-up, that this goes to engineering to have a look at both areas.
So that this deputation and concerns be forwarded to engineering for a follow-up and report back at some point? Okay.
That's right, on some of the issues that they were talking about.
Thank you.
Including the paving.
Yeah, moved by Councillor Seymour Fagan. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Yeo, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Call the question. All in favor? That is passed. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming forward and sharing your concerns with us. We'll get on top of this with staff and see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move into item 5, which is correspondence. So we have correspondence relating to the off-road vehicle use of city roads, the task force recommendations. I need a motion to receive correspondence from Bruce Barrett, Brenda Morrison, Roland Roberge, Betty Hooper, Joanne and Bruce Beatty, Grace and George, and Jim and Susan Clifford. If I can just get a motion to receive that correspondence, that's what we need to do. Moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. Any questions on the correspondence? All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. Petitions. We have a petition. Item 6.1 is a petition regarding road access for ATVs and off-road vehicles. Was presented by Jamie Morris and Peter Petrozoniak. Can I get a motion to receive the petition, please? Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Elmsley. Any questions? All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. We'll move over to item 7.1, which is a presentation that we're going to do, the off-road vehicle use of city roads task force recommendations presentation. I know our Director of Public Works, who was the staff liaison with the committee or with the task force, is going to do part of the presentation, and then I'll turn it over to Councillor Dunn, the chair of the task force, for a little bit of a follow-up. But I'll turn it over to Director Robinson. I just want to state before we get into the discussion about the task force recommendations that the discussion today is not about opening non-motorized portions of the trail. This is for road access only and trail linkage to current motorized section of the rail trail only. So I'm still getting emails from residents concerned that we're considering opening up portions of the non-motorized trail to motorized vehicles. So I just wanted to put that clarification out there. That's not what this discussion is about from this task force today. Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, just want to provide an update on the ORV task force processes to date and current status. So if we want to move forward to the next slide, we appreciate it. Before we get going, I want to reinforce with council what is an off-road vehicle. So the term is a category of vehicle that has many different vehicle types. So there's 3 examples of them there, being an all-terrain or an ATV, which is effectively a vehicle that you sit on top of and straddle. A side-by-side is a wider ATV that you sit in, similar to a traditional car, and then an off-road motorcycle or an ORM. Next slide. There's 3 more different kinds of off-road vehicles, being an XTV, which is an extreme terrain vehicle, such as an Argo. Typically, they are somewhat amphibious as well. Dirt bikes, which are non-plated off-road motorcycles, and then 4x4 vehicles, such as Jeeps and other types of vehicles. So those are the types of categories that an ORV fits in. Next slide. So Highway Traffic Act changes. So moving through with Bill 107 is Getting Ontario Moving Act. It received royal assent June 2019. There's a direction within that and guidance within that document to look at opening roads in municipalities for the use of ATVs, ORVs, off-road vehicles in general, should municipalities choose to go down that path. So in general, the bill enabled 107 municipalities to control and moderate vehicles within their jurisdiction. I will flag that the council was provided a report from staff in October last year where it indicated that this does impact our municipality. I can confirm, based on some further review of that legislation, that this bill does not actually impact our municipal roads. So the legislation as it was previously under the Highway Traffic Act is in place. That doesn't mean that this process, this review is not warranted to enable council to look at opening roads where they deem necessary and where they see it's appropriate. Next slide, please. CCL Bylaw 2019-077. So we originally had a bylaw passed 2009, and in 2019 we made some administrative amendments to that bylaw that was adopted by council, really on ground enforcement and clarification of Highway Traffic Act requirements for helmets. It does designate and identify which types of ORVs are permitted. Permit specific use of ORVs on designated roads north of County Road 8 through Fenelon Falls. So again, there's some misconception that all roads north of 8 are open. They are not. There is a very specific appendix to that bylaw that designates which roads north of 8 are permitted to be used, and they're typically connecting roads. It identifies and specifies times and periods of the year when use is permitted. And it identifies driver requirements. So they must meet highway traffic requirements, which is effectively licensed drivers, licensed equipment, and safety measures as well. It does identify speed limits. So right now it's 20 kilometers an hour speed limit where speed limits are 50, and 50 kilometer an hour speed limits where the traditional road speed limits are 80. It does clarify and enforce penalties and restrictions. So our bylaw currently is in place. And it meets all requirements under the Highway Traffic Act. There is no legislated or operational need to amend that bylaw to meet requirements. Again, should council choose to amend that bylaw to enable activity on roads, that's its discretion. But I just want to reinforce that the bylaw meets all requirements, and there is really no immediate panic or need to amend that bylaw. Next slide, please. So at the October meeting, council did provide some recommendations, some overarching themes for council to consider when reviewing the use of off-road vehicles on roads. So considerations looked at traffic volumes, haul routes, cycling routes, pedestrian usage of those roads, and that interaction with off-road vehicles, whether our roads have adequate shoulder width to reduce the need for ORVs on dry pavers into the road. So looking at should ORVs be on the shoulder or on the actual paved surface of the road. Condition of the pavement, shoulder drop-offs, deteriorated edges have an impact on ORV use. Avoidance of areas prone to flooding and washouts. Again, sight lines, hidden entrances, hazards, general topography all have an impact on use of ORVs. Future considerations such as upgrades or issues that may impact usage. And really limiting identifying specific roadways within our portfolio where it's appropriate to do so. So that was, again, some information that was provided in October of 2020. Next slide, please. Continuing down that, staff consideration. This is from, again, that October presentation. Determine if roadway shoulders are suitable for XTV off-road motorcycles, or if such use should be restricted to CCL roadways. We wanted to have consideration for a time of year. So again, should it be a spring, fall season, May, November, alignment with other activities such as snowmobile use, etc. Should we be looking at media updates to the websites to educate public on where ORVs are permitted under the current bylaw and enhancement of that program? Appropriate signage for off-road vehicles, share the road signs and other activities associated with that as well. Should we make some changes to the bylaw, as well as consulting with stakeholders such as Kawartha ATV Association and other agencies like police enforcement and other groups. Next slide. So staff recommendations at the October 20 meeting. Staff provided an overview of that Bill 107. and then provided some recommendations. So staff recommended that the detailed review of the off-road vehicles, including considerations of those safety considerations mentioned previously, be performed in conjunction with master planning exercises. So that would be the trails master plan, the transportation master plan, and one more recently put into play, which is the active transportation master plan. So, consideration of where and when it's appropriate for use could be easily performed through those master planning exercises, so that these plans all talk together and are in synergy with one another. Next slide, please. Council took that report, had some deliberation, and ultimately decided to review ORV use with a task force. So October 20, Council directed staff to develop terms of reference for a task force. And then through that process, staff followed that direction. December 12th of 2020, Council adopted the terms of reference for the task force. And at that same meeting, appointed Councillors Richardson, Dunn, and Seymour Fagan as council representatives within that task force. Public recruitment then for the 4 remaining positions on the task force occurred immediately after that, and the interviews were conducted by the council representatives. The 4 members that were assigned via resolution January 28, 2021 were Carolyn Richards, Steve Lane, Jason Ramsey, and Don Mitchell. So the 3 council representatives and those 4 public members formed the task force for consideration. Next slide. I just wanted a brief shout out to staff who supported this process. So Brianne Harrison, who's admin for roads, Ashley Locke in communications, Sarah O'Connell within the clerk's office, heavily supported recruitment, as well as the EA for Public Works, Shelley Harrington. The team members, staff members that were supporting the task force included Jennifer Johnson, manager in community services, and Juan Rojas, engineering and corporate assets director, and myself. Next slide. Terms of reference. Again, so council directed staff to develop a terms of reference for consideration. These are directly out of the terms of reference, and they are the guiding principles and activities for the task force to consider when undertaking the review. So again, to review and provide input on the use of municipal right-of-ways as trail linkages for off-road vehicles to existing municipal infrastructure, and or to establish publicly accessible trail networks. To establish publicly accessible trail networks. So it's linkages to those trail networks, as the mayor has indicated previously. This includes but not limited to trail systems connecting within Lindsay. To review and provide recommendations to council under what circumstances and the appropriateness of enabling general access to municipal right-of-ways as to designated off-road vehicles. Again, so where is it appropriate within City of Kawartha Lakes to have general access to our roads by off-road vehicles? Next slide, please. Again, continuing with the terms of reference action items is to review and provide recommendation to council on restrictions or prohibitions related to the use of off-road vehicles, to facilitate public and stakeholder consultation through regular meetings, surveys, and or public meetings as deemed appropriate by the task force related to the activities, and to provide an interim report March 2021, and then other items as approved or directed by council. So those were the core activities that were assigned to the task force when the task force was initiated. Next slide, please. So here's the activity that the task force went through. So the task force held several public meetings. Those public meetings were held on February the 5th, February the 19th, March 4th, March 19th, April 19th. So the March 19th meeting was specifically a public deputation meeting. So council, I believe, heard 24. There was scheduled 26, but I think heard 24 public deputations that I thought were very well thought out and delivered for consideration, both in favor and with concerns related to the decisions. Those public meetings were all recorded on the city's YouTube channel for public review and are still available for public review whenever the public desires. In addition to those public meetings, the task force also had held several working group meetings. So those were not recorded to the public, but those meetings were to look at all and have further deep dive discussion about some of the key items related to the off-road task force terms of reference. Next slide, please. So actions, again, the task force reviewed historical past information that includes the existing bylaw, 2009 correspondence, and some communication that came from police during previous reviews. They formulated recommendations and publicized them to the public for consideration. They did solicit feedback from representative and respective agencies. So Court Lakes Police, OPP, the health unit, our legal department, insurance and risk management department, economic development within the city, other city departments, our bylaw, and the environmental advisory committee. So lots of reach out to different agencies to provide feedback on their recommendations. Established and issued a public survey. So again, in consultation with our communications division, put together a public survey that was issued out and received an enormous amount of feedback and input into those our comments on the recommendations. All those are available on our City of Court Lakes jump-in site for review, and amended those recommendations based on input and feedback. So there was an initial round of recommendations, and based on several layers of feedback, the task force did make some minor recommendation changes to the terms to their recommendations. Next slide, please. So this is where I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Dunn to walk us through the task force recommendations, and then I'll pick things back up after the recommendations are completed.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I'd like to thank some people. I want to thank council for appointing me to the task force, and for the task force for electing me as chair, I think. I'd like to thank staff in general, and Brianne Harrison and Ashley Locke in particular. Brianne, along with her other duties that she normally does, drove our process forward. She kept our paperwork in order. She arranged our meetings. She did everything that needed to be done to make meetings successful, and absolute yeoman's work. And I want to thank her personally for that. I want to thank Ashley Locke. We had no idea how this jump-in site works. With her assistance, we got it up and running. We ran a survey, we ran a Q&A session where we were able to answer questions, all of which helped us formulate our answers. So everybody in general, thank you, and those two ladies in particular, I want to thank. Before I get started, I want to speak briefly of the process. To select the task force, we had 23 applicants. There's never been a task force that I'm aware of put on by the city where 23 citizens step forward and say they want to serve. So for everyone, even the ones that weren't finally selected, thank you. Out of that group of people, we selected 9 for a short list, and we ended up with the 4 that we selected for the task force. There has been some criticization about the way we selected the task force, that we should have had people from varying backgrounds. There was only one person that identified himself as coming from a different perspective, and the view of the task force was we had a certain direction we wanted to take the task force. We were charged with making recommendations, and we didn't feel that was a good fit. So we moved on to that. I've lost track, but I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 emails, which we shared with the task force and with council. So the response from the community has been absolutely wonderful. There's been a lot of information, misinformation, and disinformation shared. Originally, they had us shutting down all the trails and running up and down the Legacy Trail and going across the bridge, none of which was our intention, none of which was ever done, none of which was ever seriously discussed. But we finally ended up with a way forward. Our Q&As helped formulate our plan. We reached out to agencies that may have information to offer. We read all the deputation or all the responses from the various agencies, and their responses were considered in every recommendation that we made. Moving forward, if we can go to the next page. So under general recommendations, and I want to specify right off the bat, it was on the page just prior, that when we talk ORVs, in fact, we changed the recommendations just to take any misconception out. We were talking ATVs and side-by-sides as currently permitted on the trail. So the first recommendation was to open up all rural roads except those deemed unsafe by city staff and committee. Establish a 2-year program to review and amend after the first year. Permit operations of ATVs and side-by-sides also approved by the current bylaw on permitted roads between 7 and 9:30. That was to establish a time when they couldn't be there. One of the recommendations that flowed from the health unit was if you're going to have them, and they weren't in favor of having them, and I'll put that right out there. But if you're going to have them, get them off the road at night. And that was one of the considerations. It locks in with with what's permitted on our trails. ATVs and side-by-sides access only permitted during the 1st of May to the 1st of December. Once again, that's the current plan for the trail use. So it locks in, also meets the health unit requirements. Next page, please. Number 5, require all operators of ATVs and side-by-sides to possess a valid CATFA or affiliated membership. Wow, that one got a lot of response, most of it negative. People didn't understand why they were being asked or forced to have a CATFA membership. The view of the task force, and council has every right to adopt or not adopt any recommendations, but the view of the task force was that if we're connecting trails, it implies that we want people to use the trails, therefore they should have a CATFA membership. And as I said, that caused a lot of consternation, and it'll be discussed further on in the report. Have a minimum of a valid G2 or M2 driver's license. That's the minimum. It's also required by law. If you're going to ride on a road, you got to have a license. Must have a valid vehicle license plate and valid insurance. These weren't necessarily our recommendations. This is the law. You're required to have that. Meet all requirements under the HTA regulation 213/03, and to increase communications and education to all ATV riders and non-riders about the rules, the regulations, and the safety. And I'm going to just veer off here for a couple of seconds. A lot of the emails we got back complained about snow machines, and I explained to them that we don't do snow machines, we're strictly ATVs. But the ATV riders, and we recommend it and we recognize it, have to follow the rules. And we've got some clowns out there, and I make no bones about it. There's some clowns out there. Met one on Pleasant Point Road. No helmet, driving down the road, wasn't speeding. Young lad between his legs, probably about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. Everybody wants to get rid of them. We don't want them on our roads. We don't want them on our trails. What we're talking about here is we're talking about adults riding in a responsible manner, and you shouldn't punish good people for the action of clowns. But increase communication so we can teach the clowns what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, and how they're ruining it for everybody else. Next page. So, general recommendations. We'll start off with Bob Cajun. Permit operation of ATVs and side-by-sides on all roads within the village of Bob Cajun, save and except Bolton Street between Canal Street and King Street. Busiest street in Bob Cajun. Never any parking. Task force simply didn't want to plug it up with ATVs. Require all operators of ATVs and side-by-sides within the village of Bob Cajun to possess a valid CATFA or affiliated membership. Now this is going to appear in every recommendation simply because council maybe decide may decide there's places where it belongs, and they may decide it doesn't belong there, or they may decide it doesn't belong anywhere. But we put it in every recommendation so that it's easier for council to extract it if they wish. Next page. All right, recommendations for Lindsay. From the southern end of the trail, and of course I'd go in reverse, you go in the other direction, Logie Street to King Street, King Street to Lindsay Street, Lindsay to Wellington, Wellington to Victoria Avenue to Colburn Street west to Angeline North to Thunderbridge Road to the trailhead. Now, we thought that out really carefully. That wasn't just throwing names on a board. The reason why we went to King Street, it's got a four-way stop to control traffic, to make it easy and safe for vehicles to enter into the traffic lane. When they got down to Lindsay Street, they turn right to a set of traffic lights, cross Wellington Street. It's a protected route for the ATV riders all the way. Coming back, they turn right onto Lindsay Street, and they turn left, so they've only got to cross one lane of traffic. So these weren't casually thought out. We were fortunate to have a municipal police officer on our task force, and he guided us through a lot of these issues. Next page, please. Second route was just to take pressure off, so that everyone didn't go down the same route, was Logie Street to Lindsay Street. Lindsay Street north to Wellington Street, and then we hook in, and it's the same routine all over again. So those were the two routes that we recommended, or we are recommending to council to adopt. They get our ATV and side-by-sides, and I'm going to deal with that in the report, because side-by-sides is now an issue, but it gets them from the trailhead at Logie Street to the trailhead at Thunderbridge Road. It gets them there in a safe manner, inconveniences the most minimum amount of people that we can. Next page. This one I got to take ownership on, and I'm sure we're going to have a discussion on it during the council recommendations. But I just couldn't be on Lindsay Street driving past Russell Street and not try and bring vehicles downtown to take advantage of the stores and the restaurants we have there. It just seemed like such an opportunity. Once again, council will decide whether or not that's valid or whether or not it should move forward. Next page. Total prohibition on Kent Street, period. Don't want them on Kent Street, just like Bolton Street. Don't want them on Kent Street. It's angle parking there, we just don't want them there. And prohibition on Angeline Street. Angeline and Kent Street are the two busiest busiest intersection in the town of Lindsay. There's one place you don't want them, that's where you don't want them. And once again, the old requirement of CATVA or affiliated memberships. Next page, please. Fundamental themes, those in support of the recommendations, enhancement of tourism and local positive economic impact. Pandemic is driving the growth of the use of recreational vehicles. Those not supporting the recommendation, they listed public health and safety. We've been running this program or a similar program in Felon Falls since 2003. Under regulations and control, we haven't had any serious accidents. So running ATVs through Lindsay is not an issue. Running them on the roads may be, but running them through Lindsay is not an issue. Nuisance, noise, exhaust, and property damage. There's no record of this. ATVs, especially going at 20 kilometers an hour, are absolutely no noisier than any other vehicle you're going to find out there. They're a motor, and yeah, they're no noisier. So if you want to ban ATVs, you better ban motorcycles and cars and trucks from the streets too, because they're just as bad, if not worse. Concern over the capability and responsibility of enforcement. CATFA is happy to work with our law enforcement agencies to improve enforcement because they want, as much as we want, to have a safe and viable sport. But ultimately, enforcement is a policing responsibility, and it's not the responsibility of this task force. We're providing alternatives to get vehicles from one trailhead to the other. The policing community will figure out how to police it. They do a good job on other things. They'll do a good job on this. Environmental impacts considerations. Once again, we're talking ATVs, but we've got cars and trucks and motorcycles and lawnmowers out there that are having equal impact. So unless we're prepared to ban everything, why would we pick on one segment of the population? Next page.
I think we'll turn it
Councillor
over
Dunn,
here,
I think
Councillor,
that
back to
I
the
was-
director, if that's okay.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Thank you very much, appreciate it, and we'll get back to you for sure when we get to the report. So thanks for that, Pat, I appreciate it. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the council, just to wrap up the presentation. So the next few alternatives were presented by myself. They're contained within the report. They're just considerations for council to have some discussion as the deliberations are going on through the discussions today. So again, so the report is presented as receive only. There's no recommendations from staff in the report. So as alternative one, council could opt to adopt all task force recommendations as proposed. This would see that, again, the majority of roads in the ATV roads open to ATV and side-by-side use. Staff would be asked to determine roads for public safety, to identify where it makes sense and where it's not, where it's safe and where it is not. And then, ultimately assess impacts of that through a pilot program. Communication with our Director of Engineering and Corporate Assets. Staff aren't aware of established criteria for evaluating safety, so we may actually need to bring in some external resources to help us develop criteria to undertake that review. So there's going to be some time associated with that, ultimately that review. Next slide. Alternative two, council could opt to defer review to the use of ORV and ATV vehicles to the Trails Master Plan and Transportation Master Plan as originally recommended by staff. Will allow some reviewing additional public consultation and consideration within those master plans. Alternative three, council could opt to refer the recommendations back to the task force for additional review and consideration if they feel the recommendations are premature. Alternative four, the next slide, please. Could phase in some or all the recommendations of the task force. Again, there's, as Councillor Dunn went through, there are many recommendations within the recommendations from the task force. So could looking at phasing in, again, could involve piloting only rural road use or only authorizing at this time a connection within Lindsay and then reviewing some of the other alternatives at a later date. Again, purely up to council on how they want to move forward with that. Alternative five, council could opt to restrict ORV use to arterial roads or collector roads and or all roads with hard surface with the exception of designated routes. Again, that it really aligns with manufacturer recommendations that are pretty straightforward, saying that the ORVs should not be used on hard surface roads. So plenty of options out there for council to consider as they're going through and having discussions this afternoon. I believe the next slide is really just a wrap up. If there are any questions for me, other than that, we'll kick things back over to the mayor to move forward.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. I'm just, if I can, there we go. I'll just get a motion to receive the presentation at this time. Councillor Yeo, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Are there any questions regarding the presentation? Keeping in mind we're going to deal with the recommendations and such as we go through the report. But are there any questions about the process or anything that was presented that Council wants to ask of either Councillor Dunn or Director Robinson at this time? Seeing none, we have a motion to receive. I'll call the question then. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. We'll move we'll move now into the next item, which is our deputations regarding the off-road vehicle use of city roads and the task force recommendations. Reminder again, if everybody can keep their deputation to 5 minutes, it would be greatly appreciated. Our first deputation is Carrie Bartlett. Are you there? There you are. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Go ahead, please, and thanks for joining us.
Dear council members, thank you for allowing me to speak with all of you today in favor of opening more road connections for ATV use to link our trail systems together and promote our local tourism. My name is Carrie Bartlett, and I am an avid ATV rider and a resident within the city of Kawartha Lakes. I have lived within the city of Kawartha Lakes for 48 years, and I am the fourth generation of my family that has lived in this area. ATVing, like snowmobiling, is a major rural motorsport in our area. It is part of all of our rural communities and always has been. But there continues to be a really fast-growing interest from local businesses and the general public to embrace recreational opportunities and tourism in the city of Kawartha Lakes and all the surrounding areas. The Ontario government is even supporting this overall interest by passing Bill 107, which permits ORVs on identified municipal roads to help link our smaller communities together through designated trail and road systems, creating for a greater tourism impact. The city has recognized this opportunity and created the task force, as previously discussed, to review ATV road access to connect trails in the city, as Bill 107 doesn't apply to us because our municipal structure, but it does apply to most of all the other townships surrounding us. So today, I want to talk to you a bit about the benefits of ATVing and also what the Kawartha ATV Association is going to do to help promote this sport. Riding ORVs and ATVs has so many positive benefits to a person's physical and mental health well-being. The current age of the Kawartha ATV Association membership is 55 years or older, but the membership does include ranges from 18 years old all the way up to 84 years old. ATVing allows elderly people to continue to access the great outdoors and to see and experience nature in its finest. Without an ATV, many people would not be able to access the outdoors like ATVers can. Several club members have physical disabilities, which without an ATV, they would not be able to access our backcountry. Physical disabilities range from limited to no mobility, which is caused by arthritis, injury, strokes, illnesses, but ATVing gives these people the chance to enjoy nature while providing a great source of physical exercise. After a good day of riding, I feel it in my arms, my shoulders, and my legs. You are continually moving when you are riding. But one of the biggest benefits of ATVing, and it doesn't get talked about a lot, is the mental health that it brings to us. I speak to this personally, but I also from many of the riders that I've spoken with on the trails. ATVing is like a freedom, a chance to disconnect from this crazy world and focus on what is right in front of you. When I ride on the trails, I do so with a smile on my face. I feel like one with nature and my mind actually relaxes. This is truly my happy place. The amazing people you meet along the trail and the places you get to visit just adds to the overall experience. ATVing is a great family-oriented sport that can be enjoyed by everyone. Families schedule vacations around ATV trail systems. They rent campsites, cottages, hotel rooms, vacation homes in these areas to ride. They spend their vacation money here. If you build a connecting trail system, they will come. The Kawartha ATV Association itself promotes safe and healthy riding opportunities for all its members through offering a certified ATV safety and education program. They do regular trail patrols. They have ongoing volunteer trail maintenance programs and enforcement. CATPA has a successful long-standing relationship with our local OPP department, the OPP SAVE team, the City of Kawartha Lakes Bylaw, and the Ministry of Natural Resources, as well as they work with other stakeholders such as our local snowmobile and off-road vehicle clubs. In the last 5 years alone, CATFA has invested over $250,000 of our membership money into the City of Kawartha Lakes Trail System. But this does not include the thousands of hours of time that our volunteers have put into maintaining and protecting these trail systems for all of the users on the trails. CATFA has one of the largest volunteer bases throughout the province, and CATFA is well known both locally and provincially as the benchmark for trail stewardship among motorized trail organizations. CATFA has donated $30,000 to the Ross Memorial Hospital Foundation over a 3-year period. And specifically, CATFA has invested $40,000 of membership money to resurface and install proper drainage along the rail trail from Garnet Graham Park in Fenland Falls to Northline Road for the safety and enjoyment of all the trail users. CATFA has also purchased ORVs for the local City of Kawartha Lakes Bylaw Department and for the Burnt River Fire Department, so they can continue to support the health and safety on the multi-use trail system.
Can I get you to wrap it up, please, Carrie? Can I just get you to wrap it up if you don't mind? You're just at your 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Perfect. To wrap up, from 2016 to 2020, the City of Kawartha Lakes OPP department reported no ATV fatalities on roads or trails in the City of Kawartha Lakes, even though ATVs have access to many roads north of County Road 8 and through Fenland Falls. Simply put, ORVs can safely travel on roads where the riders follow the rules as they have been laid out. Trial periods do work, and it's a great way to approach this project. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just get a motion to receive your deputation, and we'll see if any of the councillors have any questions for you. Councillor Yeo, seconded by Councillor Elmsley. Any questions for the deputant regarding her presentation? Councillor Dunn, go ahead.
I'm not sure whether it's Carrie or somebody else, but so I'm going to ask Carrie just before she gets away. Carrie, were you involved with a petition?
I was the one that sent you that last petition just yesterday.
Okay, so can you tell me how many people were, signed your petition?
4,700 people supported the petition to open roads going through Lindsay and connecting our trails.
Thank you very much. And one more question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk. What is the process? Because we have 2 weeks before the next meeting to have that 4,700 signatures entered as a petition into the record.
We can put it as a petition on the agenda for the next council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
No further questions.
Thank you. Any other questions for the deputant? Okay, we have a motion to receive. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you very much, Carrie, for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next deputation is George Pinault. I'm told we're having trouble connecting. He's not on the line. George, are you there? Okay, we'll put George to the end of the line, and if he happens to get connected, we'll reach out to him again at the end of our deputation. So we'll move down to the next one. Peter Petrozoniak is joining us, and we also have the correspondence you submitted as well, Peter. So there you are. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, thanks. Mayor Latham and council, councillors, thanks for the opportunity to come and present again to you. I want to highlight a few of the things, particularly regarding public health and safety, and particularly for road use. So, and just before I start that part, I just wanted to say about the petition. There's a petition that's actually on the official Jump-In site that's been signed by, I can't remember how many people, but I must highlight that that petition was signed only by City of Kawartha Lakes residents. I believe the other petition, it looks great, but it's also includes a lot of people from all over, I think, the country. So the most important thing we talk about, what I'm presenting is facts, science, not misinformation, not disinformation. These are facts, and they come, a large part of it comes from the health unit, and you've received this as well. And I've heard that, somebody has said anecdotally that there haven't been any injuries or that sort of thing, or accidents that they know of. But I can tell you, and it's recorded, it's in the health unit presentation, that Kawartha Lakes in the last recorded period, which is 2019, so it's not long ago, had 22.8 hospitalizations. So we're talking about serious injuries, hospitalizations, 22.8 per 100,000 versus the rest of Ontario at only 4.4. So for some reason in Ontario, we are at near the top, if not the top, and that is concerning. Also, when you talk about deaths, the last recorded time that we have is 2010, 2015. And there were in the health unit, so this is the whole health unit because that's where the recording was kept, we had 2.2 per 100,000 versus Ontario's 1.8. So even there, we are higher. And I must then, this is important stuff. And so what do some of the experts say? So Dr. Natalie Bocking, who's the medical officer of health for our region, said, and this is her statement, restricting ORVs to trail use only would be the preferred the best practice from a public health standpoint. And the health unit is concerned that opening up ORV access to the extent currently being recommended by the ORV task force will be at cross purposes with the goals of the AT master plan. So think about that. Then we have Inspector Tim Thatchell from the OPP, City of Kawartha Lakes Detachment. And he said, for all ORV collisions that have been investigated by my detachment between 2016 to 2021, 47 have been on the highway, that is on roads, and 53 have been on trails or private property. So I think council has to consider that. And then Brian Robinson, the Director of Public Works, who just spoke, and thanks for that, Brian. And he stated, this wasn't in his presentation, but it's in his written presentation, that due to their shorter wheelbase, the effects of surface discontinuities, that is potholes, on ATVs and ORVs is heightened and the risk of accidents increase. As always, public safety should be considered paramount. Should council adopt opening of roads, one would naturally expect that incidents on municipal roads would increase. So ATV on-road collisions are real. Unfortunately, they occur all too frequently. It's been downplayed a little bit in what Councillor Dunn just said, but I gave you some examples. And this is just in the last month. Windsor, Ontario, collision between a vehicle and an ATV that sent one driver to hospital with life-threatening injuries. And the police said the collision was between a passenger vehicle and an ATV, and that was April 25th, 2021. The second one, an individual was transported to hospital, later airlifted to another hospital with serious injuries following an ATV accident on Royal Road in Prince Edward County, not very far from here, April 10th, 2021. Chatham-Kent, another one, life-threatening injuries, January 23rd. What about ATV deaths? They're unfortunately too common as well. This is just in 2021, a fatal UTV crash in Northumberland, not very far from here, April 12th this year. Fatal ATV crash near Apsley, April 5th, 2021. ATV rider dies in a crash near Dunnville, March 15th. So these things are real. So I'm going to tell you what I think is the bottom line. The rest of this was from experts. These are facts, not misinformation. But in my opinion, the preferred best practice from a public health standpoint is to stay with the current bylaw and not extend any more road use than is already present. That's my thoughts. And I just wanted to leave that, but the rest of it are experts and statistics. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. You're bang on your 5 minutes, so I appreciate that. Just going to ask for a motion to receive your deputation and the correspondence that you submitted as well. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Vail, seconded by Councillor Seymour Fagan. Are there any questions for Mr. Petrozoniak? Okay, seeing none, we do? Okay, you guys got to be quicker than that. Councillor Richardson and then Ashmore. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, I'm just wondering, are we going to be going through the appendix later in the report? I know that I would like to be able to show some of the tables that were in the health units report, or should I wait for that till later?
We'll wait for that for later when we get to the report, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Just questions for the deputant at this time. Councillor Ashmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Peter. Just reading a correspondence from Robert Flindell of the OPP, and he had sent to one of the members of the task force saying that I've reviewed all the ORV collisions recurring in the City Kawartha Lakes roadways from 2016 to 2020. This has resulted in 23 personal injury collisions in which 28 people were injured and required medical attention. There have been no off-road vehicle fatalities on City Kawartha Lakes roadways during this time period. All fatalities occurred on private property. You were saying that the detachment commander has different statistics, but I'm looking at the statistics in writing here from Sergeant Flindell from the OPP, saying that there are no fatalities from 2016 to 2020. There have been no ORV fatalities during this time period. Just wondering.
Yeah. So fortunately, fatalities in our area are not frequent, thankfully, but they could become much more frequent. So the inspector or sergeant, whoever you said, the other OPP officer, is quite correct. There have not been any fatalities in that period, and I quoted ORV collisions that were investigated, and the point that I was making was that half of them are on roads. So it's the on-road use. That's what I was highlighting. But fatalities are common. You know, I'm talking about, I just looked up a few, and I'm just talking about April. That's just 1 month, and they're not very far from here. We're talking about Northumberland, Apsley, and Prince Edward County. So yes, you're correct. There have been no fatalities. There have been fatalities, 2.2 in a 5-year period. But of course, we don't have that much road use yet, and that's what I'm speaking about. Is saying yes, ATVs are around. There still have been accidents and still have been fatalities, but we don't want to increase that. So thanks, Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions for the deputant? Okay, we have a motion to receive the deputation and the correspondence. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. Appreciate it. Our next deputation is Heather Stobel. We've got deputation and some correspondence from Heather as well. There you are. Can you hear me okay, Heather?
I can.
And
Thank
we can hear you just fine, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak. The Council is considering recommendations that effectively open up all 2,500 kilometers of roads to machines that are designed to be off-road only. And safety is by far the most important consideration. I understand there are other factors that you're looking at, but that is the primary consideration. In 2013, our health unit warned that ATVs were a significant source of injury and death for ATV users and often involve collision with another vehicle, and recommended the council not to implement a bylaw that would allow road access for ATVs. In 2019, Public Health Ontario reported that this health unit had the highest number of ATV accidents in its peer group. Now, in 2021, HKPR reports that Kawartha Lakes ATV accident rate is 5 times the Ontario rate, and there are higher rates of fatalities and serious injuries for ORV riders on roadways compared to off-roadways when you look at other jurisdictions. Being on roadways increases the risk of collisions with other vehicles, and their design characteristics, particularly ATVs, make them unsafe from roadways. That's coming from the health unit. The health unit states, as you just heard, restricting ORVs to trail use only would be the preferred practice from a public health standpoint. In 2015, CKL accidents represented 30% of the total ATV accidents in this health unit. By 2019, it was 60%. This is without allowing ATVs south of Glenarm Road, and they're primarily in rural areas. ORVs present an even greater risk on the roads today than they did in 2013. Manufacturers such as Polaris, Kawasaki, Yamaha, Honda all have warnings about gravel roads as well. Rural roads are not safer. They would be on the roads with school buses, traffic, gravel trucks, farm equipment, children, bikes, in the dark, with no sidewalks, no lights, and speeds up to 80 kilometers, which means 100. These roads are busier by the year, and the lull that we're currently experiencing will not last much longer. Insurance and Risk Management warned that the city's insurance advisor advised that a claim or poor claims related to ORV use will, however, have a direct effect on future premiums. Due to the city's high self-insured retention, in other words, a deductible, the costs incurred to investigate and defend such claims would be largely the responsibility of the city. Think Thurstonia. If the ORV owner was uninsured or had insufficient liability limits, joint and several liability would apply, which would further expose the city to increased costs, claims, expense, and future premium increases. They then included an extensive list of safety review considerations from the city's insurance provider. Public Works, you heard a lot of what Brian had to say, and he's recommending that the matter should be deferred and reviewed in conjunction with the related master plans, and stressed that public safety is paramount. Incidents on municipal roads would increase. Experts recommend against the use of ATVs on roads, and manuals for ORVs and ATVs recommend against it. There's no amount of insurance that removes the safety risk to others of ORVs on roadways. If council approves these recommendations, there will be more accidents, more hospitalizations, and inevitably more deaths. The high and escalating rate of ATV-related accidents in Kawartha Lakes shows us that there is a problem. It needs to be addressed as the safety issue that it has become. No pilot, no changes to the current bylaw. Accessing the trails can be done safely and legally using a trailer. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. I'll ask for a motion to receive the deputation and the correspondence that was submitted as well, please. Moved by Councillor Yeo, seconded by Councillor Dunn. Any questions for Ms. Stobel regarding her deputation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you very much, Heather, for sharing your concerns with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. We'll move down to our next deputation, which is William Steffler. Mr. Steffler, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. I'm just trying to get my video up here.
That's okay. Okay, can you hear me okay?
You can hear me, though. That's the main thing.
And we can hear you just fine, so go ahead, please.
All right. So thank you for this opportunity to speak. My comments will focus on two aspects of the task force: financial analysis, procedure, and fairness. I have a degree in economics and a 28-year career in personal financial planning. In effect, I spent 28 years providing clients with personal economic impact studies. Two common elements in any financial impact study are revenues and costs. Both of the above have to be quantified, sources named, and rationales given. The only financial references given by this task force for the city of Kawartha Lakes are vague statements such as restaurants will sell more food and gas stations will sell more gas. No sources, no quantification. Costs, nothing. The health unit supplied data on ER visits, hospitalizations, etc., yet we have no estimate of healthcare costs. Enforcement was discussed, yet we have no estimate on potential enforcement costs. There are no road maintenance cost estimates yet. There are no cost estimates, period. Nothing in life is free. All costs have to be identified and quantified. All this should be done before there is any action taken. Now, restaurant owners won't mind not having a study. They get the revenues and the taxpayer gets the bill. Same for the gas station owners and the ORV manufacturers. Industry-funded studies are infamous for their blatant pursuit of profits. The classic case is the tobacco industry-funded studies that prove smoking is harmless. The ORV industry repeats this tactic with its 2010 York University study that claimed ORVing improves health. This was thoroughly discredited in a peer review in Health Promotional International. Quoting from the peer review, the motorized recreation industry and user groups seek maximum access to the public domain with minimal restrictions on their activities. That industry has often tried to use economic analysis to demonstrate the social rationality of leaving motorized recreation largely unregulated. These analyses, however, are based on a peculiar economic alchemy that seeks to transform private interests and public costs into public benefits. And when healthcare costs are also factored in, claims of economic benefits appear unfounded. To comment on the financial impact, you need an economic impact study. So to protect the taxpayer, Council should require that before any decision is made, we need an economic impact study. The study must thoroughly consider all costs as well as revenues. Procedure and fairness. It's not right that one group gets to impose its recreational preference on the entire city. It is a preference, not a necessity. Many urban and rural residents do not share this preference for motorized recreation. I'm speaking up for the interests of those citizens and groups who were excluded from the task force. We don't really have a task force. Given the citizen selections, we have a lobby group disguised as a task force. This council has to protect the interests of rural and urban citizens and groups like Environmental Action Bob Cajun who want active transportation plans, a reduction in greenhouse gases, not an increase. This council has to protect urban and rural residents who do not want their roads to become motorized recreational trails. You should not sanction such a flawed and one-sided process. Why isn't this part of the upcoming Trails Master Plan? It is a blatant attempt to exclude the interests of a large portion of rural and urban residents. In closing, I'll remind you of two things. People entrust financial advisors to invest their money using sound, data-driven decision-making, and your constituents expect the same sound, data-driven decision-making from their elected officials. I urge you to move away from the unsupported and unsubstantiated economic promises before you now. Stop, think, do your due diligence by getting a complete and comprehensive economic impact report before any further discussion on this matter. And while you contemplate that, take the time to reflect on the task force you and you alone have created. The bias of its composition is so blatant that it would never withstand the scrutiny of an outside agency. That needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steffler. Appreciate that. I'll just ask for a motion to receive your deputation and the correspondence you submitted from council, please. Councillor Dunn, moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Vale. Any questions for Mr. Steffler on his deputation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is passed. Thank you for sharing your concerns with us, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll move down to our next deputation, which is Leslie Barrett. There you are. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. I am an active longtime member of Community Care Foundation in Hospice in Lindsay, and prior to that volunteered countless hours in CCL schools to help families and children. In that respect, I'd like to speak to you about families. We have children walking to and from no fewer than 10 elementary schools in the town of Lindsay. As parents, we spend our lives trying to keep our children safe. We are reluctant to embrace high-risk activities for good reason. We do our best to make sure they are properly coached in contact sports. We do our best to steer them away from risky social behaviors. And when it comes to motorized vehicles, we teach them road safety and to respect the property of others. But every parent knows we also pray a little every time they pull out of the driveway. Despite our efforts, our kids have a way of wearing us down, pushing us against the limits we set. They claim we are too strict, too safety conscious, and only parents standing between them and the simple freedoms all their friends enjoy. Think about the situation before you. This is not about ATVs getting from one trailhead to another. And this is not about leisurely weekend trail rides on Saturday or Sunday. This is about opening up roads to anyone with an ORV license. That means parents who have made rules about riding the ATV in the laneway or in the fields around their homes will now be pressured by their children to be more lenient. You know what the conversation will be. Why take the school bus when I can jump on the ATV to get to school? All the other kids' parents are letting their kids take their ATV into school, and I'm the only one of my friends who's not. Have you really thought about this as counselors, as parents, as grandparents? The picture that's being painted for you is one of safety-conscious ATV riders, always focused and in control of their machines, or the couple out for an afternoon ride in their side-by-side, driving through town between trailheads and maybe stopping for a coffee along the way. Well, I can tell you that's not the picture that our local secondary school principals would paint for the potential behaviors and decision-making lapses of their 16, 17, and 18-year-old students. Kids who are in the prime of their youth, vibrant and indestructible, where posting the coolest Instagram picture or snapshot post takes on new meaning. I find it unbelievable that under these conditions, the task force asked to correct the fatality numbers reported by the OPP to specify that in CKL, the majority of accidents and all deaths related to ATV occurred on private property. Surely you realize that simply because private property is where the most ATV activity is currently happening with youth. But if you open up access to municipal roads in the busy town of Lindsay, those accident numbers and fatalities are sure to migrate over from private property to municipal roads. That's not conjecture, that's simply fact. In closing, I want to say this. Look, much of this debate has centered on the two things, the vague promise of economic growth through gas and coffee purchase versus the healthy living environment, reduced noise population, and safety of the residents of CKL on the other hand. My suggestion is you add our parents and our children to the equation because parents don't need any more pressure on effective parenting. You need to think long and hard about our elementary children walking and about teenage ATVers being given the green light to our municipal roads. This is dangerous mixture concocting, and the outcome will be both sad and heartbreaking when accidents happen. And there will be nothing you can do to repair it that if you amended the existing bylaw. We parent as a community. Do your part. Don't release the reins on high-risk activities. Kids are going to dabble in that world despite our best efforts, but they sure don't need us opening the doors further. Look, despite the way Bill 107 is being portrayed, this is not a bill in favor of ATV use on our roads. It's actually a call to make sure municipalities have bylaws in place to expressly keep them off municipal roads. We already have one. Human life is far more valuable than human entertainment. I guess lastly, I'd say, why are we even talking about this during a pandemic? Parents are stressed to the max already. You seem to be in an awful rush to get something done, which is no more importance against the landscape of the last 16 months. At least put it aside until true public meetings can occur. And while you think about that, think about surveys that seek input from the people of CKL most affected, not the ORV members from across the province. This should not be an exercise in quantity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate that. I'll just ask for a motion to receive your deputation, and we'll see if there's any questions. I need a motion to receive. Thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any questions for the deputant? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion's passed. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Barrett. I appreciate you sharing your concerns with us. I'll move down to our next deputation is Mr. John Spears. Mr. Spears, are you with us?
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir. We can hear you just fine. So if you're just calling in, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm speaking today specifically about Sorry, 1 second here. The screen keeps popping up, guys. I'm speaking today specifically about two important topics. First, the premature timing of this ORV task force. Sorry, something keeps going wrong with my screen here with Zoom. So I'm speaking today specifically about two important topics. First, the premature timing of this ORV task force process. And second, the council decision-making process and how it should benefit all of their constituents. So in regards to the premature timing of this ORV task force process, given decisions about additional ATV road access directly impacts the volume of ATV traffic on an already stressed trail system, I would like an explanation from council as to why the task force is pushing for recommendations and in turn bylaws probably created right now when the process for new trails master plan will not be occurring until the August timeframe, literally only a few months from now. So given ATV road use decisions will obviously impact ATV trail use, would it not make much more sense to hold the two processes at a minimum in parallel as one affects the other? And what is the rationale for trying to accelerate these road access decisions right now in advance of the trail master plan process, let alone the pandemic? I would also pose the question to council, why would you not want to wait, analyze, and consider the recommendations from the new trails master plan consultant subject matter expert that you will probably pay in excess of $50,000 for their expert recommendations and opinions? Their expertise will provide explicit recommendations that will affect ATV use on trails. So is it not obviously premature to be holding an ORV task force process that may lead to bylaws, including potential, without having the ATV use on trails recommendations from a subject matter expert consultancy firm that you'll pay a significant amount of money for their opinion? In regards to my second important topic, the council decision-making process and how it should benefit all their constituents, I realize my following example is only a small subset of the larger discussions we're having here, and believe it illustrates a systemically flawed council decision-making process when it comes to any decisions involving when and where ATVs should be permitted. So the following are direct excerpts from the 2006 Trails Master Plan commissioned, again with $50,000 of taxpayers' money, from the subject matter expert recommendations from the Envision Hoff Group. This specific example pertains to the East Cameron Lake section of the trail, but I'm using it explicitly to make a point about recommendations and versus acceptance or denial of the recommendations. Recommendation number 9, discontinue ATV use on this section from Garnet Graham Park along the East Cameron Lake to North Line Road. The recommendation goes on to expressly detail out bypass options to execute on that recommendation. This section of trail is widely used by local residents and visitors to Fenland Falls for walking and cycling due to its lake edge location and proximity to the beach. And the inclusion of ATVs in this mix raises significant safety concerns. This is from the $50,000 subject matter expert. Specific concerns often related to the safety in general, safety of children, noise, and the numbers of ATV traffic volume concerns. As noted in previous sections, a number of concerns were identified. And it goes on to say again, noise, dust, speed, volume, children's safety concerns. The ATV and snowmobile response to those concerns from a subject matter expert was they had a significant concern limiting their motorized access to the urban areas. Zero concern for the safety, the noise, the dust, children, grandparents, people coming out from their properties onto the trail. Zero concern for that. It was all about enjoying their ride. I'm making a request that council's decision-making process is more responsible in terms of supporting the needs of all their constituents, including respecting people where they conduct their lives in their homes and cottages, respecting the safety of children and the elderly, respecting the right of walkers and joggers and cyclists in dense pedestrian sections. Clearly, none of the concerns were supported when council ignored the detailed recommendations provided to them from a paid expert. And there was never any explanation as to why the recommendations were not accepted. In closing, everyone is entitled to enjoy their hobbies and sports, especially during this pandemic time. Hobbies are more important than ever. but there are more than enough wide open trail and off-road kilometers available for ATV hobby use and enjoyment. I'm asking council to be more mindful of their constituent body's interests and frankly their rights, and not unilaterally defaulting to always support the wishes of one single large organized interest group and their hobby at the invasive expense of other constituents. And just anecdotally, very, very quickly, if I got a few more minutes, Pat Dunn's reference to lawnmower noise, and I'll gladly accept my neighbor cutting his lawn once a week on a Sunday for 30 minutes versus a steady stream of daily, nightly ATV decibels. Like if you ever compared the decibel levels, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And as far as the other deposition about enjoying mental health and enjoying physical health on the trail, that's wonderful. But as you go by and leave a group of walkers or cyclists or joggers in a dust cloud sucking up the dust for the next quarter mile, I think you neglected to think about the impact of that. And in terms of trail maintenance,
Let's get you to wrap it up, Mr. Spears. Your 5 minutes. I'll just get you to wrap it up, please.
Yeah. So final point in terms of trail maintenance, the $50,000 study said no ATVs on a particular section of the trail, and it would also drastically reduce maintenance costs. So there's all sides to these, but what I'm really just asking for, and thanks again for the time, is just, mindful consideration. There's all kinds of different needs and uses. And to date, over the 15 years that I've been there, every single decision goes to one organized large lobby interest group, and I think it's egregious. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I'll get a motion to receive your deputation, and we'll see if there's any questions. Councillor Elmsley, seconded by Councillor Dunn. Any questions for Mr. Spears? Seeing none, we have a motion to receive. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you, Mr. Spears. Appreciate you sharing your concerns with us.
Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to go back to George Pinault, the deputation from before our last one. He wasn't available before. Are you with us now, George? We've got him in the waiting room, but we can't get him on audio. Okay, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a 5-minute break just to stretch. We'll come back in 5 minutes. We'll see if Mr. Pinault is been able to connect. If not, we'll move on and deal with the report and the recommendations from the task force. So a quick 5-minute break for a stretch. 6, 7, 8. There we go. Order. I'll put out a last call for George Pinault regarding a deputation. I know you're struggling to collect, Mr. Pinault. Maybe correspondence, send us correspondence if you can hear me, for the council meeting on May 18th would be just as appropriate. But unfortunately, if you can't hear me, I'm going to move on. So we'll move on to item 7.1.2 of which is the report from Director Robinson regarding the recommendations and everything else. So the motion, just to get the report in the record, let's move that the report be received and that this recommendation be brought forward to council for consideration at the next regular council meeting. Let's start with that. Councillor Yeo, seconded by Councillor Dunn. All in favor of receiving the report? That's passed. Thank you. So now what I'd like to do is, now that you've heard the deputations, correspondence, we've had a bit of a discussion. So in order to put some continuity to the recommendations, I want to take us through them sort of one by one, and we'll do them a little bit at a time. We'll deal with each issue on its own. We'll have a discussion about each issue on its own, and we'll just take as much time as we need to go through these. So just a couple of things. So the current bylaw allows ATVs and side-by-sides on some select roads north of Road 8. Side-by-sides are only allowed on the VRTC north of North Line Road at this point. So my question, we don't need a motion, but my question to council, are we okay with that bylaw right now in its current format? Is there any issues with that bylaw right now? That portion of the bylaw north of Highway 8? Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Actually, there is. Just speaking with OPP, in bylaw, they do not carry around a list of roads that are open or not open. So having certain roads closed doesn't really make sense. If the entire area was open, then it's open and then it can be enforced. But having to carry around a table of what's open and what's not makes it confusing for our bylaw and enforcement. So I think it might be much more clear if we were allowed them to open throughout that area.
Well, that wasn't part of the discussion by the task force, I can tell you that. And that's been a bylaw that's been in place since, I think, 2004, allowing access, at certain points, obviously side-by-sides north of North Line Road and ATVs on certain select roads to link to the trail. So my opinion is that's a whole different conversation if you want to open up the whole north. You're talking about opening up the whole south as part of this conversation. You're basically talking about opening up the whole city for the sake of enforcement. I'm not aware of a whole lot of issues in the north part of the city on roads leading to the trail at this point, and I guess my recommendation would be let's leave that portion of it for now and focus on what the task force focus on south of Highway 8, which is what the majority of the discussion was, because we already have that in place for the north. Go ahead, Councillor.
I just felt for simplicity, and I'm not saying open up the entire city. Actually, the task force does say that, but I'm not saying that right now. I said, why don't we have a look at that table? If we don't have a look at the table now, then we look at the table in the future. Again, for consistency across the area.
Okay, so why don't we see what we're going to do in other areas of the city from the task force recommendations, and then if we want to roll that into a future recommendation or a future look at reviewing that, we can do that at the end. If you just want to make a note to bring that to my attention at the end, and we'll move on with the task force recommendations at this point. Otherwise, we're going to go completely sideways in this discussion here today. But I appreciate your comments. They do make some sense. So the other question I have, and I'm going to ask for a motion just for clarity, we put this out to the task force to explore motorized vehicles and linkage and more road access to trailheads south of Road 8 for ATVs only at this point, because there's no access to the trail, linkage to the trail for side-by-side. So for ATVs only. So what I'm asking council do we want to have a discussion about amending this bylaw to allow more road access south of Road 8 for ATVs only at this point? So we either do, and then we'll continue with the discussion, which was the task force recommendations, or we don't, and we're done. So I'm just putting that out there. Councillor Dunn, go ahead, sir.
Well, you're partially right. In the city of Kawartha Lakes, there's only one place where side-by-sides are currently permitted. That's the north of the North Line Road. The people over in Bobcaygeon, over in that neck of the woods, have access to the 5 Points Trail, right in Bobcaygeon, or just outside of Bobcaygeon, where side-by-sides are permitted. So I guess where I would take the conversation is talk ATVs for the vast majority of the city, but carve out a piece over in the Bobcaygeon area that also permits side-by-sides. Because there is a part over there that does permit side-by-sides.
Well, I don't think there is, but I'm not going to have that argument with you here today. So then let's just do this. Do you want to have a discussion today about amending the bylaw in any way, recommendations to... You'll move it, seconder, that we want to continue this discussion? Councillor Yeo, thank you. Councillor Ashmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the southeast part of the city of Kawartha Lakes, in the Omimi area, there's been comments, you'll see in the package, many comments of people wanting to access into Omimi. So even if we're not going to do it now, maybe in a phase 2 of this program, Omimi, I believe, really should be included in this whole project. As well, I'm thinking about Thurstonia and Dunsford area, if that could be included as well. And I could bring this up next week or 2 weeks from now when we do the meeting, but I just wanted to point out those 2 communities and those 2 areas that I think should be included as well, even if it's in a phase 2.
Well, we can have that discussion, but I'm just going to ask if we're not going to get through this today unless we stick to the point. If we can just, if you're in favor and you made the motion to continue this discussion about road access south of Highway 8 for ORVs, then let's just take this one step at a time. We'll go through the different recommendations from the task force, and we will get to a certain point at the end. Councillor Ashmore, you can attempt to add, or we'll see where the discussion goes. If we don't try to do this in some kind of order, folks, we're going to be going around in circles here, so bear with me. Is there any other comments regarding moving forward with the discussion today? That's the motion. Okay, I'm going to call the question then. All in favor? Okay, on we go. Thank you. That's passed. So just a question. And the only reason I ask that is because although the province has changed the legislation to allow more ORV access on municipal roads, we as a city are under no obligation whatsoever to do that. So I just wanted to get that clarity out of the way to start with, that we don't have to change the current bylaw. We've chosen to review it, and now we've made a decision to have a further discussion about it. So we'll keep going. So the recommendations from the task force, there's recommendations that any recommendations that we make here today be for a pilot project for 1 or 2 years. 2 years was a recommendation from the task force. So can I get a consensus that we agree that whatever we put in place will be for a 2-year pilot project with a review after 1 year? I think that was the original recommendation. Before we get into the individual recommendations, can we agree that that's the direction we're going to take? Nothing is being done permanently, then we don't have to do it for every recommendation. Councillor Dunn, will you move that? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any comments on that pilot program? Councillor Fagan, do you have your hand up? No? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, I'm going to speak in opposition to this. I will not be supporting this at this point. I think that there needs to be more time, more reflection, and we're moving too soon. So at this point, I will not be supporting it.
So you're not supporting a 2-year pilot project on anything? Okay.
No.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. Okay, so the other, a couple other things. So do we agree that any road, I don't think we need motions here, but let's just come to a consensus. We agree that any road access that we discuss will be from May 1st to November 30th and 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m., same as the current trail bylaw allows. Are we in agreement with that for any recommendations we make? Is there any issues with that? Councillor Elmsley?
I'll move that.
Okay, we done. Okay, so you'll move that, and seconded by Councillor Yeo. Any questions, comments on that? All in favor? And that's passed moving forward. Thank you. So the other couple other, and I'm just going through these because these were raised by the task force. So as Councillor Dunn mentioned in the presentation, the G2, the M2, licensed with insurance and current plates, and must meet all regulations under the Highway Traffic Act. We have no option here. Any ATV that, or side-by-side that is allowed on any road has to meet those conditions. So that's not a decision we need to make. So I just wanted to clarify that. KATVA membership required for road access was one of the issues that Councillor Dunn brought up as well. So I want to share with you a legal opinion we got from our solicitor that there is no valid public purpose for this requirement from a safety perspective. It would not hold up in court, in her opinion, and it is in excess of municipal authority. Any road access is supposed to be linking to the trail or a trailhead or linking trails, and KATVA right now requires you to have a permit to be on the trail. So it's up to them to enforce that, and according to our legal opinion, we should stay out of that argument for any road connections regarding a permit. Any issues with that comment? Councillor Elmsley?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think that while I understand what's being said, it seems to me that it would not be untoward for us to highly recommend KATV membership. And the reason I say that is the ATV Association does a lot of work on the trails and spends a lot of their money to make sure that the trails are in good shape for everyone to use. So I think that us encouraging people to belong to KATV, I understand that we can't force them to, but I think that if we strongly encourage it, changing the wording slightly, that might be a way to go.
Well, I don't disagree. I mean, I think based on the legal opinion, what you're hearing is that we really have no authority to mandate it or put it as part of a bylaw. We're overstepping our bounds if we attempt to do that. As part of the education process, you know, we can certainly put it out there, but at the end of the day, we're supposed to be dealing with road access to trail linkages. And why are you linking to a trail that you're not allowed on if you don't have a pass in the first place? So I think it's one of those sort of unwritten things, but Councillor Richardson, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you. And I'm in agreement exactly with what Doug Elmsley said, Councillor Elmsley, but you're right, we can enforce it, and it wasn't for the ATV Association that brought that up as a recommendation. We looked at it as, you know, a lens that if you're going to be using a municipal road to get connected to a, you know, legal off-road vehicle trail, then you should have the proper permit. So as said, we should just educate, use it as an education and communication piece that it's strongly suggested.
Thank you. So what do you want to do? Do you want to do a motion, or do you just want to put it in with the understanding we'll make it on the record with the understanding that as part of the education process going forward, we'll recommend the KATVA permits, and I'm sure they will obviously do the same to anybody accessing their trails, which they do now. So are we okay with that? Okay, thank you. So let's talk about rural roads. Obviously, at this point, it's ATVs only, south of Highway 8. Save and except if we want to talk about a corner by Bob Cajun, which we can have a discussion about later. We're talking about, again, trail linkage and road access to trailheads, rural routes only. So I don't want to talk about Bob Cajun. I don't want to talk about Lindsay at this point. We're talking about rural roads. The task force has come forward with some recommendations about opening up a lot of different rural roads. And then there's a separate discussion about ORVs, side-by-sides being allowed south of Highway 7A. But for now, let's just talk about the rural roads, the access on rural roads, opening it up. We're talking mostly to ATVs because south of Highway 8, across the municipality was one of the recommendations from the task force. Councillor Dunn, would you like to speak to that in any way?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've had quite a conversation about this. The side-by-sides are off the table simply because they're not permitted on our trails. During conversations, we've been asked, it's been suggested, whatever terminology you want to apply to it, that we name roads as in where they are permitted, as in opposed to just opening it up to having staff say they're not permitted because they're unsafe. That, the way I understand the wish of the task force, can certainly form a phase 2 portion. There are areas where we are prepared to move forward and provide specific recommendations where we name roads, but generally speaking, we need to probably re-examine that portion of it again, so that we can actually say we want them on Drainall Road, or we want them on this road or that road, as opposed to opening it up wide open. I could get specific now if you want me to, or just tell me what you want.
No, I think right now we're just talking about the recommendation from the task force. The original recommendation was, opening up rural roads in general in the municipality south of Highway 8 to ATVs at this point. And I think from what you're telling me, the task force is looking at deferring that part of the discussion in general. We can do specific roads later, but just in general, opening up the municipality for rural roads, defer that discussion to phase 2 discussion later at a later date. Is that basically what you're saying the task force is now recommending?
Yeah, and I would target that if we have support of the task force and council, obviously, I would target that for sometime in September, where we start to identify specific roads, as in opposed to just a general statement. So I would think we could probably accomplish that by September.
So what's your motion then? That we defer the discussion on generally opening up rural roads to motorized vehicles to September, and then come back with more of a focused road network, as opposed to generally opening up every road in the city under the guise of linking to a trail? Is that basically what you're proposing we do?
That's what I'm saying, but I see 4 other sets of hands up, Mr. Mayor, and I'd rather, before I make a motion, hear what they have to say.
Well, I know, but my struggling with this
okay.
conversation today is I'd rather put a motion on the floor. If that's what you felt the direction of the task force, we can have a discussion and go from there, but it gives us something to start with. So if you're comfortable with that, Councillor, I need a seconder for that, and then we'll have a discussion about it. Second by Councillor Vale. Thank you. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Dunn?
No, I'm good.
Councillor Vale?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, questions. Councillor Ashmore, and then Elmsley, and then Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Just a comment. I don't think we should be road specific, but community specific. And my comment is, and it's through public input to me and in this task force, I'll name 2 communities, Thurstonia and Omimi Village proper. Those 2 locations they've been asking for it more than anybody else, and I just wanted to point those two places out. So I'd like to keep them in the list if I could.
So the motion is to
Showing it,
defer this recommendation about rural roads to September. Perhaps in September, you could be part of that discussion when specific routes or communities comes forward on a more specific basis. We can have that discussion then, okay?
Well, just a clarification, so, but we're still including Lindsay and Bob Cajun, right? Right now, in the first phase.
We haven't had the discussion about Lindsay and Bob Cajun yet. We're just talking about rural roads. I'm just trying to do this one step at a time so that we have a little bit of clarity on where we're going. I know it's confusing. You're just going to have to be patient. Councillor Elmsley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the idea of deferring this, and I'm wondering if during this deferral, will there be linkage to the three other master plans that are being considered during that same time period?
Well, I think it's common sense if we're going to have a discussion in September and these other plans will be well underway by then, that obviously they could certainly be part of the same conversation. Or in general, we're all talking about the same thing, so I think the timelines line up. I don't know the exact dates on when everything's going to be completed, but I think the discussion would fit into that quite well, actually.
Do you need it as part of this motion as a friendly or something, or will it happen?
I don't have all the answers here, Councillor. I'm open to whatever Council wants to do. I'm just trying to guide you through the conversation. I'm just trying to guide you through the conversation here. Perhaps you can propose it to the mover.
Okay, to the mover, will the task force link with the other three master plans to come back in September? Or did you want something more formal than that?
Well, the problem with the other three master plans is the one plan has been on the books since 2019 and hasn't moved forward. And if it doesn't move forward to 2023, who knows? Like, I have no idea when some of these plans are going forward. I talked to Community Services. They hope to start the master plan in the near future. The master transportation plan, which is an engineering thing, which is just a routine where they talk about roads and things. Once again, I have no idea when they plan on starting, much less when they're going to be finished or making recommendations. So if we formally tie these decisions to that, it could be 2031 before we finally make a decision. Master plans have a tendency to go on forever. And so I am reluctant to formally tie it to any kind of plan out there that's not.
Well, I guess my suggestion would be that you just connect with them and see if there are common areas where you may benefit either party.
All three departments are involved with the task force. As well, actually planning's not, but certainly engineering and community services are both tied with the task force. They're there for all our meetings. They can more than give us any kind of direction, suggestion that comes along, and we tend to listen.
Okay.
Councillor Elmsley, if I can suggest, I agree with Councillor Dunn. I think if we just loosely tie them in at this point, if it comes back in September with recommendations and council's not comfortable and wants to defer to a specific master plan at that point, when we know what the progress of those master plans is, and I think council can make that decision at the time. But I think for now, this puts the discussion off to a later date to come back with some more specifics, and then we can probably make a more informed decision at that time on where to go from there. So I think we're good, if you're okay with that. And I think Councillor Dunn makes a good point that, you know what, they're part of that discussion in the first place, but I think we can get there as well. So if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Thank you. Councillor Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I think I speak in favor of the deferral because I think both Councillor Vale and I on the west side of the river have people that come up, well, we'll say from the South Port Perry area, and there might be some merit in having a designated road or two designated roads out there that would link to the trailhead at the conservation area. So at this point, it's being framed as a deferral because there may definitely be merit in having a designated road or two out in that area.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour Fagan, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to let everybody know that the task force didn't take any of this lightly, including the deferrals, looking at all the reports, listening to everybody's deputations, reading through hundreds of emails and everyone's opinion. So I think it's really important to realize that we are taking into account everyone's opinion, not just, as some people have said, only one group's opinion. And I also wanted to clarify, they said that everyone on the task force has something to do with ATVs. I don't own an ATV and I have nothing to do with it. So I think it's really important that we are not biased as people have thought. So I think having this deferred makes sense for everyone.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on that portion, that motion? I'm going to call the question then. All in favor? That motion's passed. Thank you. So let's move down to, there was another recommendation that came out of the task force late, which was ORVs. And just for clarification, that includes side-by-sides and ATVs, be permitted south of Highway 7A from Yelverton all the way over to Bethany on all roads south linking to the Ganaraska Forest, I guess, where side-by-sides are allowed. So that was a late recommendation that came forward from the task force. I know there was some talk about possibly deferring that discussion as well. Maybe I'll turn that portion over to Councillor Richardson. And what did you feel the late direction from the task force was on that issue? Councillor Richardson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, and through you. Down my area, it's a bit of a hot zone, and trying to figure out how to migrate through the pros and cons. There's a lot of different factors down here, and I think it's important that we actually take some more time to come up with a thoughtful linkage to those trails. Right now, there's some moving mechanisms with MTO actually shutting down the illegal trail system down Highway 35 and 7A. So this is creating some other issues when it comes to illegal use on some of our side roads. And I personally have reached out to Kawartha ATV Association just for the fact that I need their guidance and I need their stewardship down here. And another reason why we need to defer it at this time, if we're going to move forward with a phased-in approach, then we need to take our time and get the proper communication and education out there, signage, link up with enforcement. So I'm thinking moving ahead is we do a phased-in approach and look at linking, the different communities to the trails, and maybe not looking at a blanket approach. So we need to take this time and think this through properly.
So are you comfortable then taking that recommendation, and I think it's covered under the rural roads deferral when we talk about rural roads linking to the trail, possible coming back in September with possible specific roads. I think this recommendation could be deferred and put under the same recommendation if you're comfortable with that. We won't move ahead with this recommendation that was brought forward at this time. Are you good with that?
I'm good with that. I prefer to put it in that bucket if we could. Thank you.
And Councillor Dunn, as chair of the task force, do you feel that's the appropriate direction and the discussion from the task force as well? You're on mute, sir.
I take my lead from the task force. I have the impression from talking to them that that's the process that they would prefer to use. So I'm fine with it.
Thank you. Any other questions on that portion? So Councillor Richardson, I just wonder if you're comfortable. I do think that it's worth discussing, not today or not approving today, but a future discussion, again, maybe towards September, about a linking the trail from Bethany, the trailhead in Bethany to the Ganaraska Forest, and a specific trail linkage on a road network, not to make a decision today, obviously, but are you comfortable making a motion that the task force and staff explore, because there's boundary roads and there's some issues down there, a specific road linkage from the Bethany Trailhead to the Ganaraska Forest to be brought forward again at a later date. Are you willing to move that?
I'm willing to move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Elmsley, thank you. Do you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to it? I won't. I think it's pretty straightforward. Any comments? All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. Okay, so the next topic of discussion we had was another late recommendation brought forward from the task force, which was ORVs. So again, we're talking about side-by-sides and ATVs anywhere east of Sturgeon Road and north of Pigeon Lake Road and the rationale was for access to the 5 Points Trail Network in Trent Lakes. Again, the discussion was about opening up all roads, and my understanding was there was going to be a future discussion about specific roads, possibly linking that portion of the city. But I'll defer that to you, Councillor Dunn. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have done that. I have a list that I received from the task force that suggests specific routes. And later on during this meeting or during this session, I'll be more than happy to read them into the record.
Okay, is it your intention to get those routes approved today or to have a future discussion and bring back some recommendations at a later date, as in September, like we're talking about with some of the other roads?
Okay, my intention would be to deal with both Bob Cajun and Lindsay today. My intention would be to make recommended routes that come into effect on the 1st of September to allow the CATFA Association an opportunity to prepare signs and do their maps so that it's well advertised as far as the ATV community is prepared, or is, so that they can actually adopt it. So I would be prepared today to make recommendations on Lindsay and Bob Cajun, and the Bob Cajun recommendations would include the areas that we're proposing for side-by-sides.
And I accept that, and we're going to get to Bob Cajun and Lindsay. I'm just trying to, please bear with me, because, the task force came forward with some recommendations very late, and now there's other recommendations about specific roads instead of roads in general. So I'm just trying to make sure the public's, that we're all on the same page. So this recommendation was about ORVs anywhere east of Sturgeon Road and anywhere north of Pigeon Lake Road, with the rationale. It wasn't about Bob Cajun, it was just about in that area, and it was really talking about all roads. Am I to assume that we're putting that conversation on hold and we're going to deal with more specific roads when we get to Bob Cajun?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Are we all good with that? So we don't need to move forward with that recommendation at this time. Okay. Thank you. And so let's go down to Bob Cajun now. So before we get to the specific roads leading to Bob Cajun, one of the recommendations that came out of the task force was to allow ORVs, that's side-by-sides, and ATVs on all roads in town except Bolton Street between Canal Street and King Street in the village of Bob Cajun. So let's deal with that recommendation first. I don't know if that recommendation's changed or if we're having a further discussion, but Councillor Seymour Fagan, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, yes, that recommendation has changed. We want to look at a route that can allow the vehicles into Bob Cajun to the commercial district. So they can stay in the hotels, go to the restaurants, go to the gas stations and the grocery store. We are 10 minutes away from the trailhead. So it actually is a tourism asset for Bob Cajun, and we don't want them everywhere. I've spoken to many different groups. There's people who are for it and people who are against it. And I think that if we have certain routes into the commercial area and out of the commercial area, this should appease everyone. And it is a 2-year trial period. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And we can stop it at any point immediately. So yeah, so we're not going to do what we originally recommended. We do have some routes that we are looking at right now for Bob Cajun. And it's to get to the commercial areas specifically. That's it.
Okay, so we're not moving forward with the motion from the task force or the recommendation that ORVs, side-by-sides and ATVs be allowed on all roads in town except Bolton Street between Canal Street and King Street. We're not moving forward with that, right? Just so everybody's very clear and I don't get nasty emails an hour from now. I just want to put that out there. Okay? So what is your proposal if you want to get together at this point with Councillor Dunn? What is the road linkage? I assume the rural roads you're planning on linking to Bob Cajun and through Bob Cajun with access to the commercial district are all sort of linked. So maybe now's a good time to do that together. So I'll turn it either to you or Councillor Dunn, whichever one of you has that information.
Councillor Dunn, you have it, don't you?
I do, yes. Okay,
okay.
Move that County Road 24. That would be the entire route of County Road, or I guess it's City Road 24 now, all the way into Bob Cajun. So that would be from 36 right up to Bob Cajun. And I'll provide the clerk with a copy of this message. Turn right at Sherwood Street to King Street East, and then take it all the way over to City Road 36. Turn left at Sherwood Street. Where am I? Hold on. Turn left at Sherwood Street to Canal Street to 36. Turn left off of Canal Street at the bridge, cross the bridge to Main Street, follow Main Street all the way to County Road 30 or City Road 36. So that's the route through Bob Cajun. And then Pigeon Lake Road from Old Surrey Lane to County Road or to City Road 36. City Road 36 all the way to the Trent Lake border, which is Peterborough County. So that would be the recommendation, and I'll move that recommendation.
You'll second that, Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Yeah, yes, but sorry, yes, but in addition, we're just not sure about that federal bridge. TSW, we thought we might not be allowed on it. We haven't got a definite answer from them today. They didn't know. So we are waiting on that at this point. So yeah, that's the one thing that, and also, do we have on there from Joseph Street? Is that one in there? Short section of Joseph Street that goes from Main to County Road 8.
I haven't got that on my list.
Okay.
So this is my concern. You know, we're kind of last minute trying to put a route together. So would you guys be open to referring this possible route back to the task force to come forward at the June committee of the whole meeting? Have one more meeting, discuss the route, get it straight, because I'm hearing left at Sherwood, I'm hearing right at Sherwood. You know, maybe we can have a map so that we can all have a good look. We're still talking about implementing in September, I assume. We're not talking about before that because of signage and everything else. So, you know, I'm not disagreeing with the concept. I think we're trying to piece something together here that I would certainly feel more comfortable if the task force could have another crack at it, another recommendation, come back in June, we can do a quick turnaround, and then we can have maybe a more informed discussion when we know that that's the actual recommendation from the full task force. Are any objections to that?
I can definitely have it for you by June.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said I definitely can have it for you by June.
Well, you're being awful cooperative today, and I appreciate that. So maybe what we can do is take the route.
If you're, they're more than happy to. The task force is more than happy to work, and I'm more than happy to work with them.
Well, we're more than happy to give them some more work. So maybe what we'll do is, if you're okay, so the rural route connecting Bob Cajun and the route through Bob Cajun be referred back to the task force for a further recommendation and just some clarity, and that come back to the June committee of the whole meeting. Can I ask you to revise your motion to that, Councillor Dunn?
Sure can.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour Fagan, will you support that revision? Thank you. As a seconder, any comments, concerns on that? I think we'll have a little more clarity at that time. Councillor Seymour Fagan, go ahead.
just wanted to thank everybody and Bob Cajun for their input. There were many different sides, and I appreciate everyone's opinion on this because we all have different views on what's important to us. So, you know, I think working together instead of opposing people constantly is what we need to do as a community. Let's work together and figure out how we can make everyone happy.
Thank you. Councillor Elmsley, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to clarify something. Councillor Seymour Fagan said that we're in a pilot and we could shut this down anytime during that period. And I think what we said with the motion was we would review it after a year. Are those two things in conflict, and which one is accurate?
I don't think they're in conflict, Councillor. I mean, if it's a 2-year pilot and we're going to have a review after a year to see if any adjustments need to be made, if it totally gets out of control, council can change the bylaw anytime they wish to change the bylaw or repeal it. So I think all those options are on the table and open. I don't think they're in conflict with each other at all.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Thank you. So when this gets referred back to another task force meeting, Councillor Ashmore, I would suggest some of these routes run through your ward. So perhaps you could join that task force meeting and just give your opinion and be part of that discussion as well, with some of that linkage, and then that might get us, get us further on board moving forward. So I know the task force is open to as many opinions as they can get, and I think that would be a good direction to go. Any further comments on that motion? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That's passed. Thank you. See, we're getting there. Okay, the next one is the Lindsay linkage, again, for ATVs only, because side-by-sides are not allowed on this portion of the VRTC trail. So it is, when we're talking about a linkage through Lindsay, it is for ATVs only. And we've talked about a route, 2 routes actually. Yeah, you saw in the presentation. There is, anyways, yeah, I'm going to turn this one over to Councillor Dunn again. He came forward with, the task force has got a recommendation on a route through Lindsay. If council wants to put a route through Lindsay, we certainly don't have to, but we did agree to have the discussion. So I'll put it over to Councillor Dunn on where he wants to go at this point. And again, I would recommend, Councillor Dunn, that possibly an option here is to refer it back to the June, same thing, the June, let's go back, have a look, make sure we're good on the route, and come back at the June Committee of the Whole and maybe deal with Bob Cajun and Lindsay at that time. But I'll leave that up with you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one we have beat up pretty well. It's been on the drawing board shortly after we started. We looked at our options. There are no viable options to go around Lindsay. We're not prepared to recommend that we build a special bridge to hook up with the trail. So the options, if you want to hook the 2 trailheads up, are coming through the town. There was lots of discussion. We had input from a representative of the Kawartha Lake Police Service, so they're aware of every motion that we made, and we got no negative feedback in regards to this trail. So I will move that twin routes be established between the trailhead at Logie Street and the trailhead at Thunder Bridge Road. The first route being south on Logie Street to King Street, King Street to Lindsay Street, Lindsay Street to Wellington Street, Wellington Street to Victoria Avenue, Victoria Avenue to Colburn Street West, Colburn Street West to Angeline Street North, Angeline Street North to Thunder Bridge Road, Thunder Bridge Road to the trailhead. And as an alternative route, I will also recommend that Logie Street to Lindsay Street, north on Lindsay Street to Wellington Street, and then the route goes back to the original, the first one, which I can read in if you wish me to. And that's what I would recommend for the route through Lindsay. If I get a seconder, I'll explain the rationale behind every turn.
And to be, okay, can I just ask, to be implemented September 1st?
Okay,
to
so
allow time for education and bylaw and signage and everything else? Is that the plan?
That's the plan.
Okay, can you make that part of your motion? Councillor Seymour Fagan, are you,
Yes,
have you got your hand up to second that? Okay. Councillor Dunn, do you want to speak to it?
Okay, so, well, of course, you always, no matter what you do, you have to start off at Logie Street because that's where the trail opens up. Logie Street is a relatively wide street, which is a good thing. And housing facing on Logie Street in comparison to other residential streets is somewhat reduced. And we recognize no matter what we do, we're going to have ATVs going past people's homes. King Street is a controlled intersection. It's a four-way stop, enabling ATVs to safely turn at the stop signs and get down to another stop sign onto Lindsay Street. Lindsay Street to Wellington Street, there's a set of traffic lights at Wellington. It's a right-hand turn, which is safer. Lindsay Street to Wellington Street, we have a set of traffic lights. We cross the bridge. We have a set of traffic lights at William Street. We have a set of traffic lights at Cambridge Street, and we're going to turn right onto Victoria Avenue. We go north on Victoria Avenue, where we come to a set of traffic lights for Colburn Street, and we have a set of traffic lights at Angeline Street to take us north. Colburn Street, once again, there are homes involved, so it's and very much the same with Victoria Avenue. There are homes involved, but there's a school also on Colburn Street, which was of some concern. But it's a completely caged off area. Like there's a fence right along Colburn Street, so the children playing in the schoolyard at I'm going to say Leslie Frost at Alexandra. They're not going to be kicking a baseball out or a football out in front of traffic. It's a safe street, and that's the reason for, or that's the rationale for number one. The alternative route of coming up Lindsay Street, it's a short trip down Logie Street to get to Lindsay, which will take the pressure off some of the residences on Logie Street and some of the residences on King Street. It'll take some of that pressure off because it'll spread the load out. It also gives traffic the opportunity to buy gas, to stop off at the Dairy Queen. So it does give them an opportunity to gas up and grab a bite to eat as they're traveling through town. And then, of course, we hook back into the original route. It also sets up an option at a later date to access the downtown business area of Lindsay, which is a concern of mine. I'd like to do that. It's not necessary for the first round, but it does open that opportunity if at some later date, if the program works at some later date, we'll be able to take advantage of that. So that's the rationale. We can argue back and forth all day long as to whether or not there's a better route or an alternative route, and there probably is. But the task force belief that this is the best route, and I think you got to start someplace. So I hope you support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour Fagan, you seconded it. Do you want to speak to it?
Other than the fact that we went over almost every single different way that we could get through Lindsay, and we had staff as well assisting us on this. So, we're not taking this lightly. As either. So to be able to link them, this is what we found the best way. And there are 2 routes, because we do know that there might be construction on one of them in the future. And also you're not pushing everybody on one route. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson and then Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. Go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, I just want to add a comment too. It was a well thought out process. We did, communicate with city staff. We went through all the markers. When we pick those routes, there's slowdown, there's traffic calming, there's traffic lights. And when they're going through town, they're at that 20-kilometer maximum speed as well. So that's another consideration that we took into play with this. So I feel, it's a pilot project. We give it a go and let us collect the proper data through our enforcement agencies to see if this is a workable project through Lindsay. But it's a big ask from the rurals wanting to be connected from the south to the north. So I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, go ahead.
I guess I really don't know where to start. Anyways, we had a number of deputations today. I think that were well thought out and whatever. And as the committee has said, we're never going to satisfy everybody all the time. But I wouldn't know why we wouldn't give the citizens of Lindsay the same opportunities we give the citizens in Bobcaygeon or the citizens on the rural roads of bringing this back for further considerations or a different route on certainly in June. I think that's only common courtesy that we give the other citizens those opportunities. And I can honestly say, even though I represent a lot of the rural area in the Lindsay, the municipal area in the town of Lindsay that I represent, probably 90% of my constituents really don't want ATVs going through Lindsay. So what is, if I'm a representative for the people in my community, it's an overwhelming majority of people don't want them in Lindsay to start with. So I think at least the common courtesy is we could give the opportunity, the same as we did to Bobcaygeon and the rural people as well, to wait at least until June before we further consider this. So that's certainly why I'm speaking against it this time.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion for the link through Lindsay? Okay, so I'm gonna weigh in a little bit. I'm gonna speak against the motion as it stands. I'm not opposed to linking the north to the south. I think we need to do it, but similar along the lines of Deputy Mayor O'Reilly is, and I certainly, I'm not saying the task force didn't look at this and take it all into consideration. I know you did. I just, there's been a lot of public comments, a lot of public concerns, a lot of public comments, and I just really think we should, there's no big rush here. We're talking about implementing in September, if it passes. Let's go back. There's been a discussion about, we can't do a link around Lindsay. You can't bypass Lindsay. I've yet to hear an argument why not. I don't need to have that discussion today, but I would like, my preference would be let's go back in June. Let's put that on the table that, that we discussed a linkage, a bypass around Lindsay. Here's the reasons why it doesn't work. We owe it to the folks who are concerned. We might not agree with some of the issues, but they're real issues for these people. And there's people who live along this trail, who live along this route, who have concerns. So is it that big a deal to step back for 1 month, have another meeting, and just reiterate? Maybe you come back with the exact same recommendation that you have here. But what we're saying to the residents, we've heard you, we've heard your concerns. It's not about what we think, folks. It's about what our community thinks and how we find a compromise. And I don't think asking for another month just, it's not waffling, it's not putting anything off. I don't disagree with it. I just, we need to make sure this is important. There's a lot of people engaged in this issue, for and against. It's not a scorecard that, more people are in favor than more people are opposed. This is about our community, and this is a change to a part of our community that isn't that way right now. And I don't believe for a minute that you're going to see thousands of ATVs racing through Lindsay. I don't believe for a minute that 20 kilometers an hour is people are even going to notice that they're on certain portions of the road. I think there's a lot of unknowns out there, and I'm in favor of trying it. And to Councillor Dunn's points, if it doesn't work, we're going to shut it down. People start racing through town at 30, 40, 50 kilometers an hour. Guess what? They're going to lose the privilege. This is a privilege. Our trails are a privilege. A road access through Lindsay is a privilege for our motorized users. If they abuse it, they will lose that privilege. But let's just do the courtesy for our residents, take another look, slow it down a little bit, folks, is all I'm asking. And if we come back in a month with the Bob Cajun recommendation, with the exact same recommendations, you know, we should do that. I have some concerns, you know, Coburn Street. I'm happy to be part of that task force meeting in June so I can maybe better understand the discussion. 20 kilometers an hour is not very fast when you're on a road where everybody else is going 50. There's cars parked along Coburn Street and Angeline Street. Are we going to be weaving out of parked cars, you know, no mirrors? I don't know. It's just Coburn Street and Angeline Street's one of the worst intersections in the city right now. Do we really want to add to that? It's going to be under construction for the next few years. There's a lot of work going on. I know you've got alternate routes there. I'm just saying, you know what? I'm not going to support it at this time because I think let's take a month, let's look at it, let's come back when we have maybe a bit more study, a bit more understanding of what some of the residents' concerns are, have another look at it, and make sure when we do this that we're doing our due diligence and we're doing it right. So for that reason only, certainly not against the recommendation, but just in favor of slowing it down a little bit. So I'm gonna not support this one as it stands. Any further questions or comments before I'll ask Councillor Dunn to sum up? Councillor Seymour Fagan, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to clarify that we did do our due diligence and we have listened to resident concerns over and over and over on both sides. So I don't have an issue in putting it off, but we did do our work. We didn't take this lightly, and I think it's important that everybody knows this. Like I said, I don't have a problem putting it off until June. And you know what? Some of the people who are opposed, maybe they could come forward, just like they have in Bob Cajun, with a different idea. Again, working together, everyone working together, not just someone saying no and someone saying yes, or everyone saying no. So I think this might give us a little bit more time to work together, but we have tried the best that we could as an entire task force and listened to everyone. I just want, that needs to be clarified.
No, and I'm glad you did, and I hope my comments didn't come across that you didn't, because that certainly wasn't my intention. I'm just looking at it to your point. We're making a commitment here to approve a route through Lindsay. Your point is exactly on, in my opinion, is if you don't like this route, what are your alternatives? But don't say no, because we're going down that road. We're obviously all on board with that. Come forward with your recommendations about a better route, and maybe it just gives us a little bit more time to have that discussion. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to, I appreciate what the task force put forward. I'm in support of linking the North and the South Trail. I'm just saying maybe we can get a little more input. Maybe there's an idea out there now that we've committed to doing this that we haven't thought about, that somebody else has. Let's just have that one more discussion and make sure when we do it that we're, you know, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. That's all I'm saying. It's not a comment at the task force for not doing your work. Councillor Dunn straightened me out on that already. He said, we bang this around. This is what we come out with. I respect that. I really do. I'm just saying, I think we just need to step back and make sure we're doing it right. So, Councillor Richardson, you had a comment. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if that's what we want to do in, bang it around, and you join the task force meeting for the next meeting, and then we come back in June and bring something solid that we need to move forward. We need to, move forward with some type of solution, and a reasonable solution. That's, if you look at the survey results, 75% of the city of Kawartha Lake's looking for some type of solution. So I'm okay if we put it off for a month, but then when we do come back in a month, we need to put something on the table.
Agree. Thank you. So, okay, Councillor Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, go ahead.
Yes, I don't want to belabor the point, or I don't want to diminish the work that the committee has done. The committee was a committee appointed by council that was recommended for this, and certainly not to diminish any of the work you've done or whatever. But anyways, I think a sober second thought, and perhaps maybe another there's a route that maybe we haven't thought of, or then we can have that wholesome discussion in June.
Okay, Councillor Ashmore, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just wanted to say that, you know, if we wait for master plans to come about, we can wait decades. They go on and on and on, and we never get them done. Bridges, don't get me on bridges. We've been waiting 20 years for a crossing, and we talked about a bridge for ATVs and a non automotive bridge to cross, but that never happens. But you know, the task force, I was quite impressed with them that they actually got the work done, and they listened to the people, and they got the work done in a specified time. So they set the example. They're setting the example of how to get things done. So I think, you know, if we keep delaying it, then people are going to say, well, here you go again, you guys, you can't even make up your mind, and we voted for you to make up your mind to do something. But if we keep putting things off, and you know, we've already done that, so we don't want to be the council that's going to be remembered as keep putting things off and off and off. So we want to do something. I think now's the time to do something, and I think that would be a major positive thing for our communities if we make a decision now instead of keep putting it off. So I don't think we should be delaying it too much, but anyways,
thank you.
That's about it for now.
Well, the motion on the floor is to do it right now, so you might get your wish. Councillor Yeo, you had a question? Go ahead.
I give you a motion to defer till June.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Non-debatable. Give you a motion to defer.
So to defer the recommendation to come back at the June committee of the whole meeting? I'll accept that.
Please.
I'll accept that with the recommendation on the floor, seconded by Councillor Elmsley. It's not up for debate. Just the time. Everybody okay with the June meeting? All in favor of deferring this recommendation to the June meeting? That motion's passed. Thank you. Okay, so the last item we have on the regarding routes for discussion today on the ATV task force is the part of the recommendation from the task force, and I think I know where we're going with this one, but again, I'll turn it over to Councillor Dunn. There was other roads linking, you know, making the link in Lindsay from Russell and Cambridge and Wellington and stuff to the trail linkage road. I know you're talking about in the future, but the recommendation from the task force was to approve those at the same time. Am I with the understanding now that those will be part of a future phase once we agree and get started on a linkage in Lindsay, so we don't need to deal with that issue right now? Is that accurate? Go ahead, Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, before we go down there, right now I've got yourself and Council Ashmore attending my next meeting to have a discussion about this route that we've decided to defer. I'm sorry, but I cannot have you both at that meeting because we just became a council, because we'll have quorum for council. So one of you will have to try and figure that out between you as to who's not going to attend.
We'll figure it out. We'll get our opinion in there one way or the other.
Now, and the other thing, because I never got a chance to comment, we had a meeting with you yesterday, and you were unable to come up with an alternate route. I don't understand how in the heck we can figure out, well, just by putting it off for a month, we're now going to come up with an alternate route. We've been kicking this can down the road, and I'm pretty sure in June when we come back, we're going to have exactly the same route that we have right now, because this has been opposed consistently.
Well, Councillor Dunn, that motion's already passed, so I'm not sure what you're commenting on. We're deferring it till June, and we can have that discussion in June.
I'm commenting that you're planning on coming to our next meeting to help us out.
You can say I told you so when we come back in June. You can say I told you so when we come back in June. We'll have a discussion about routes and before we do that. So that motion's already passed. So what I want to talk about now is the other recommended routes in Lindsay. obviously, if we're deferring this, but is it the task force now recommendation that any other road linkage to the north-south trail linkage, once that approved, then we'll have a future discussion at a future date about any other road linkage once we have that in place and we've got proper signage and everything. Is that an accurate assessment from the task force, Councillor Dunn?
The plan from the task force was to discuss this in September, both this and the next recommendation on the list about access for Lindsay residents. The discussion was to defer that until September, until we have an approved signed route through Lindsay as far as access goes.
So why don't we make a motion then that any other approved motorized linkage or access to the linkage in Lindsay be deferred to till September, be put off till September for future discussion once we have a set linkage through Lindsay. Are you comfortable moving that, Councillor Dunn?
Sure.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Seymour Fagan. Any comments, questions? All in favor? That motion is passed. That's all I have on my list regarding ATVs. Thank goodness. On road access, linkage, I think we've covered all the recommendations from the task force. I think we've made a few recommendations. We'll have a future discussion at Lindsay on a few more specific things. We've put some other things off. So is there any other issues on this report or at this time? I think all the other discussions that you were talking about, Councillor Ashmore, fall under, some of the deferrals till September. When we have a future discussion, we can start talking about other communities and other linkages on rural roads. So I think we've got it covered for now. Am I missing anything before we move on to the rest of our agenda? Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for everybody. Again, thank you to the task force for all the hard work you did on this and the time, and thank you for the public who have been listening, for your input. Those of you who have provided input, and we'll come back in September, or we'll come back in June, have another discussion, a little finer discussion on a couple of items. And we'll also obviously have a future discussion moving forward. But I think we've got some good direction today moving forward. So thank you all. So let's move forward in our agenda to the next. Did it? We received the report right off the bat at the beginning. Yep. So let's go down to reports. Item 8.1 is proposed land management team management directive. Sherry Dyer. There she is. Hi, Sherry. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Have you gone out and bought an ATV yet?
Oh, I'm right on that.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn this over to you.
The final of it.
If you can give us a quick 2-minute overview on this report, and then we'll see if there's any questions, and we'll go from there. So go ahead.
Absolutely. So this report provides an overview of the draft land management team management directive. And this directive was drafted in accordance with the council resolution made July 17th, 2018. So the directive sets out the expectations for including council in the land management team process, including circulation of the land management team agenda 1 week in advance of the meeting, the opportunity for councillors to attend any land management team meeting or to provide comments regarding an item via email. And councillors can be copied in on correspondence that's sent out to applicants if they express an interest in an item. The directive further sets out the general decision-making precedents that the land management team will follow for common matters, such as requests to purchase road allowances, sales of city-owned properties, docks and boathouse license agreements, vesting orders and acquisitions of land, and permission to construct agreements. The report also includes an overview of the land sale process, which can take 8 to 12 months or longer. It consists of the background research, so things such as title searches, MPAC searches, historical records search, review by the land management team, utility consultation, public notice, committee of the whole report, surplus declaration at a regular council meeting, survey, appraisal if required, and a closed session report to council to provide the appraisal report, list on the open market unless it's a direct sale, and a disposition bylaw. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
So Sherry, just for clarification, if anybody is not happy with the decision of the land management team, they are instructed their appeal process, for lack of a better word, they can come to council and make a presentation and see if council wants to overrule the decision of the land management team, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the report? Councillor Helmsley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give you a motion to receive the report. And then if you want, I have 2 follow-up motions. But I don't think I want to change the name from the Land Management Committee to the Land Management Team. So I'll just give you a motion to receive at this time. And you can tell me if you want me to make the other 2 motions, or if you want to do them as a follow-up.
No, let's do the receive first. Motion to receive by Councillor Helmsley, seconded by Councillor Yeo. All in favor? Receiving the report. Thank you. That's passed. Follow-up motion, Councillor Helmsley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Councillor Strangway and I made the motion some 3 years ago, I guess it was, to have council notified and included in the land management process, I thought that would be all we would need. However, I do find, and I do thank all the folks on the land management team and all the people who are involved in it for their work, for their diligence and the things they do. But what it comes down to is that there is no council representation on this committee and they're making decisions. I find that often after the land management team meets, or the land management committee meets, that I end up with the phone calls from residents who are very unhappy. And so my first motion would be that 2 members of council be appointed to the land management committee. And my second motion is that decisions of the land management committee and their minutes come to council for approval in the same manner that the planning advisory committee and other committees of council have to do when we're dealing with property and we're dealing with other issues that deal with residents.
So what's your follow-up? Let's deal with your motion then, Councillor, if we can. So what's your follow-up motion? You're kind of rambling on there. So just give me a motion that we can discuss.
My motion is that 2 members of council be appointed to the land management committee, and further that the minutes and decisions of the land management committee come forward to council for final approval.
Okay, that's your mover. Anybody want to second that? Councillor Yeo, do you want to speak to it any further? Councillor Elmsley?
Well, I'll do it in sum up. I think I've said how I feel.
Thank you. Councillor Yeo, do you want to speak to it?
Yes, briefly, thank you. I think it's going to save a step. I think we do it with planning and it deals with land matters. So it comes to a committee, and the name committee is a committee. So it comes to committee, it gets hashed about the same as it does, but it has council input on decision-making. And then it comes to the grand council at the end of it, and council approves those minutes or not. It completely saves a step for the public, like literally a huge step for the public. It speeds things up to my mind, and it's either yes or no. at committee and yes or no at council, and it's done the same as committee of the whole or planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Sherry, do you have any opinion on that recommendation? Maybe that's a loaded question.
That is a loaded question. So I see Ron Taylor. I don't know if you were going to speak to that when you lean forward. I think that we do weigh all of the options, and I think that it makes sense to continue to operate the way we've been operating. We've been managing things effectively, and so my recommendation would be to keep the committee or team, whatever you would like to call it, the composition the same.
Thank you. CAO Taylor, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Just want to add that we're deliberately actually proposing the name change because it really isn't a committee that's been established sort of by council formally. The terms of reference are much different than the committees that you're describing. And so we deliberately want to recognize it for what it is. It's an internal staff working group that's managing or dealing with various operational matters or bringing sort of opinions to the table. Our guidance is really your council policies already, and that's why a number of them are spelled out in this particular report. And it's really black and white from our perspective. I think that elevating it to a formal committee and doing some of the different tasks that are associated with it, we literally look at hundreds of land matters annually. I actually think it could create a burden to council and potentially to the members, the council members inclusive. Again, I just want to reiterate, this is really intended to simply be a working internal team that's putting recommendations forward to council where it makes sense and implementing your policies, I think, where it makes sense. So I'm not sure, we might want to take a second look at least at what the composition is, if that's council's wish, just to make sure that it still is efficient.
Thank you. Any other? Ms. Carlson, are you just here to join us, or did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I did have a comment. And further to what Mr. Taylor had indicated, I had intended to assist council with providing more matters to council where there isn't a council policy, and creating only matters coming to land management for decision, being those matters that already have a council policy. But then those matters where there's not a council policy, a new provision in this proposed management directive tells the individual that will be recommending to council something, so that council will then see those matters. So then that way, everything where council has already said we have a policy on it and have delegated to staff signing authority, we'll continue to see those, and that will not be something that you'll probably want to see. And then for those matters where there's no defined policy, we'll come to a conclusion, but then bring that to council's attention and ask council for their input. I think the benefit of doing it this way is that there are some matters where we talk our negotiating strategy on a matter, and then we'd like to keep those minutes confidential. So it may result in us having to really look through each of the agenda items to determine is this going to open council or to closed council under the program that was suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to speak against the motion. I think, this is, just based on some of the comments that are made, this is a delegated authority. There's a lot of issues that come through the land management committee team, whatever you want to call it, that we, again, have policies for. We set the policies, or within the policies. To have that all coming to council for council approval just is to me, is not speeding anything up. It's just a duplication of what we've got in place. If there's a controversial issue, then, staff can bring it to council, or if somebody doesn't like the decision was made, they have the option to appeal and come to council, whatever that is, against one of our policies. I think we're trying to fix something that isn't broken here. And I know there's been some concern about this, but I think we're diving into something here that we're just getting into the weeds where we don't need to be as a council, but that's just my opinion. So Councillor Ashmore and then Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Elmsley for bringing this forward. And I think it's a great motion because it gives more transparency. I'll give you an example. In 2019, I think it was earlier in the year, up in the Weldon room, I had people who were wanting to get information. I wanted to get information from the Land Management Committee and was told, you're not even allowed to come in. You can't even ask a question. This isn't right. So it's not transparent the way it is right now. We need to make it more transparent to have an elected official on that committee. At least one, two is great. But I can't see anything wrong with having an elected official on this committee because they make some really important decisions. And I've personally experienced, I mean, the people are great in there, but nice people and good composition. However, you have to have elected representatives overseeing it. You have to have some transparency. And right now, I don't think there's much transparency right now. Sure, they come to council for the final decision, but along the path, along the way, along the process, it's just not transparent. And I think they need to change that. And this motion, I think, will certainly alleviate that.
Thank you. Councillor Dunn, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council always has to be, or councillors always have to be at the ground floor when decisions are being made, rather than getting a final result. We have 2 meetings a month. I'm sure we can work this into our busy schedule. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll ask Councillor Elmsley to sum up. Councillor Elmsley, go ahead.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I said it all before. I was hopeful that the changes we made a couple of years ago would result in things from the Land Management Committee coming forward and not being so contentious. But I found over the years that they have a meeting and then my phone starts to ring. And I think that if we were involved, if we had some council representation on the committee and calling it a committee, and then we can vet whatever is in there to either send it to a closed session or deal with it in an open session, the same way we do with the Planning Advisory Committee and other committees, that it will work quite fine, and that the council representatives who go on this committee are not going to be a burden to the committee, but in actual fact, I think they will help them. So I know that staff may not see it that way, but I think that we will get to a point where things will work more smoothly and be a better process for the city. And certainly having it so council is involved and then the reports come back to council, I think just makes a whole lot of sense. So I hope you support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we just add to your motion that these recommendations be brought forward to council for consideration at the next meeting? You okay adding that at the end, Councillor Yeo? We just add that to the bottom. Absolutely. As a committee recommendation. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the question. Everybody's comfortable, clear on the motion. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Next report is item 8.2, 2021 tax policy decisions. I think Jennifer Stover, there you are. Director Stover is going to give us a quick overview. I think we see this every year, don't we, with these tax allocations. Give us an overview, if you would, Director, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So this is exactly as you said, Mayor Latham, this is a report that we bring forward annually. All the recommendations are exactly the same as they have been for the last number of years. Typically, if we were going to make recommended policy changes to council, we would do so in a year of an MPAC reassessment. There was supposed to be an MPAC reassessment this year. MPAC pushed that off because of the pandemic. So this year, the tax assessment's the same as it was last year. and therefore all of our policy recommendations are the same as last year and the year before that and the year before that. There are two items within this report, though, that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is that in March of 2020, Council agreed that we would eliminate street lighting as an area rate and put it into the general levy. But that resolution very specifically said we would do it in the next reassessment year. So because that was pushed off this year, we also pushed off that decision. So street lighting will continue to be area rated for this year. And then the other change that's in the report relates to small business tax class. So the province, recognizing that small businesses were being perhaps disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, created a small business tax class, which would allow the municipalities to tax small businesses differently than other businesses. Unfortunately, the regulations around how to do that have yet to come out, so that won't be taking effect for this final tax bill, but it'll be something we look to bring forward to council as a policy decision for the next final tax bill, so next year at this time. But we've included it in the report just so that you are aware of it. But in summary, no changes being recommended to our tax policies for this year.
So if next year's the reassessment year, then all those discussions we can have before this report comes forward next year as far as direction if we want to change any of the classes, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Got a report in front of you. Councillor Elmsley?
I'll move it as printed.
Thank you. Get a seconder. Councillor Vale, thank you. Any questions or comments for Jennifer on the report? Councillor Ashmore, go ahead.
Thanks. I won't keep going for very long here, but I could go on. But street lights. So I just want clarification on that, please, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Stover on street lights. So this is going to be in the general tax roll in the rate, like in the general rate for every taxpayer in City Kawartha Lakes will be paying for street lights. Am I correct? Or so we're changing it to that from an area rated base of charging.
Director?
So council gave, so through the mayor, council gave direction at a March 2020 meeting that they would like us to stop doing street light area rating and put that into the general levy. The impact to the individual homeowner is negligible. However, that direction said that we would do it would be phased in over a 4-year period and in the next assessment period. So because MPAC has not started with a new assessment period yet for this final tax bill and this in accordance with this report, street lighting will continue to be area rated for this year.
Thank you.
Okay, and next question, the BIAs. So every BIA will now be levied a special charge anywhere in City Kawartha Lakes. The BIAs will be charged a levy.
BIA collects a levy from its taxable residents. Linda can speak to it, but there's only a BIA in Lindsay downtown. There's no other BIAs, right. I don't believe, anywhere in City of Kawartha Lakes. Linda, is there anything I'm missing there?
Absolutely not. You're correct. It's a subset of properties just to the downtown core area.
Thank you.
Okay, and just two more quick questions, please, Mr. Mayor. Minimum tax, number 7.01. Can you explain that now? So there's going to be a minimum tax. Is that on business or individuals? How does that work, please?
I'll take a stab at that, and Linda can correct me if I'm wrong. But the minimum tax is simply that we don't issue bills if they're below a certain amount. Am I correct on that, Linda?
That's correct, Jen. Yeah.
Good,
okay.
Councillor.
And my final question is, final question, please. Page number 373 under 5.03, credit to water bill account. So I'll just read that. If an eligible person sells their eligible property during the year and provided that a final read was forwarded to the city prior to the change in ownership, a rebate will be credited to the final bill for the portion of this year of the year, the eligible property is owned by the eligible person and shall be issued based on the consumption used up to the change of ownership date calculated on a prorated basis. Well, I'm dealing with one particular case in a situation where the people sold the house and they were kept being charged. The pre-authorized payments kept coming out, and our staff are saying that that's a legal problem. That's not our problem. Let their lawyers sort that out. So is this going to correct that it's going to be that we're going to be owning up to that? Or because right now we're just saying that's your problem. If we just keep taking out your payments, even though you've sold your house in October in this situation, we still took out at least 1 or 2 payments. But we're saying to the person right now, let your lawyer look after this. So are we going to be, lack of better words, owning up to it now? Or how is this going to change this? Because this caught me here. If we can change this would be a much better way, because it's right now, the way it is right now, we're telling people, just go talk to your lawyer because we've got your money, but we're not going to give it back to you because we kept taking it out. But hopefully this will change that. Is that correct?
Okay, well, let's give the director somebody a chance to answer. Go ahead, Linda.
Jen, you want to go? That's up to you. I can take this one, but.
So Councillor Ashmore, what happens is when you sell your home, you have a due diligence to advise the city that you've sold your home, and it's generally done through the lawyers. They say, Jennifer Stover sold her home to Andy Letham. Andy Letham's the new owner. The city is then made aware that they can go in and they read the water meter read on the day of closing, so they know which portion of the water bill Jennifer Stover is responsible for, which portion of the water bill going forward Andy Letham's responsible for. A similar calculation happens with property taxes. If the homeowner doesn't advise the city that the sale has occurred and that we know who the new owner is, then what happens is the billings continue to happen to the previous owner, in which case the previous owner needs to go back to their lawyers, and the 2 lawyers sort out which portion each party is responsible for paying. It's not for us to do that because we don't have the information. I could come forward and say, I sold my house to you, Councillor Ashmore, on a certain date. You could argue something different happened. So that's why we have them go through the lawyers, just so that it's all legally done and both parties are in agreement with how the transaction is going to occur. So that section of the bylaw doesn't change what's occurred with with the resident that you're speaking about. What it does do is outline the process for how the city will handle the payment of utilities at the time of sale.
Thank you. Any further questions regarding tax policy decisions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor as printed. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Jennifer. We'll move over to item 8.3, which is the release of Fenland Falls Legacy Chest Funds. I think Director Shanks is on the line. I think this one's pretty straightforward. It's just a one-off request that's come forward. The councillor's supporting it. Anything, Director Shanks is available if we need him, but I'll turn it over. Councillor Elmsley, will you move this? Thank you. You'll move it. Second by Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Elmsley? It's pretty straightforward.
No, it's all in the report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Any reason we need to bring in Director Shanks? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. 8.4 is a bulky plastic recycling program. It says David Kerr, but I think Director Robinson's going to give us a quick overview on this. It sounds like a good program. There he is. Go ahead, Brian. Do you want to give us a quick overview and we'll see what we can do?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to council, this is a program that's being recommended by staff to address recycling of bulky plastic. So bulky plastic very clearly is like large toys, broken lawn chairs, laundry hampers, those kinds of large bulky plastic items does not include bolt and bale wrap. That material is being considered in another method by staff later on. It's a program to look at options to pull that material out of our landfill, and anything we can divert from the landfill is a win from staff side. So it's a pilot program recommended by staff over the next couple of years to review the feasibility of that program.
Thank you. It's in the report, pretty straightforward. Any questions or comments or motion? Councillor Richardson?
I'll move it as printed, and I want to send out accolades to the department. And again, looking at different programs that are helping the deviation of garbage into our landfills and giving them more use and length, and it's going to save us money in the long run. So I appreciate this.
Thank you. So your motion as printed, seconded by Councillor Vale. I guess you just spoke to it. Councillor Vale, do you want to speak to it? No, you're good?
No, it's all clear.
Thank you. Councillor Yeo, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. And speaking in support of the pilot project, looking forward to the bolt wrap, bale wrap pilot project in the future. Happy to continue to support the mattress and the construction diversion. I think the waste division is doing a wonderful job, and this is just another step in the right direction. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further questions or comments? Call the question. All in favor? That's passed. Thanks, Brian. Pass on our thanks to David. I know he did a lot of work on that as well. Thank you. 8.5 is the Growth Management Strategy Task Force. I know Leah Barry's with us and Acting Director Richard Hawley from Planning. So I think Richard's going to lead us off. So I'll turn it over to you, sir. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. This is a request to establish a task force for the growth management strategy that we have started. As you're aware, we have to implement our 2019 growth plan numbers, so our population and employment forecast to 2051. Growth expected to go up to 117,000 people and jobs expected to go up to 39,000. The GMS will be a main cornerstone in the sort of servicing master plan group that will also inform the official plan review that we're going to be starting in a couple of years. That will look at land use policies and development policies for the next 25 years. Council has allocated $100,000 towards this program in the 2021 budget. And we've recently awarded the 24-month contract to a consulting team that's been led by Watson & Associates Economics Limited in partnership with Dillon Consulting Limited. The GMS will include a broad public consultation piece and a stakeholder engagement piece, which will ultimately look at preferred growth scenarios for the city. We'll include a number of factors, including land capacity, servicing capacity, and allocations, and ensure that we can meet our growth plan intensification and density targets. From this perspective, it's really important that the GMS be linked fairly closely with the servicing allocation and also transportation to make sure that all parts of the development piece work together. As a resource, the task force would be a resource to help out with this process. And we sort of look at the process of having a steering committee as well as an internal technical advisory committee, which would include various city departments on that. So it's a very similar approach to what we have with the rural zoning bylaw as well. And essentially the task force that we're looking at would be the steering committee for this project. The task force would comprise of a maximum of 9 members, consisting of 5 stakeholders, 3 members of the public, and 1 council representative. The task force would provide direct input to the project team, so that's the consulting team, and identify any issues, review or discuss strategies that would be provided and required. We anticipate approximately 4 task force meetings over the development of the GMS, which would provide recommendations through the city's planning advisory committee. And once the task force is appointed by council, we would then do a formal launch of the GMS process as a whole. That's it for the presentation. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Council, we got a motion in front of you and acting director to answer any questions. What is your wish? Councillor Vale, go ahead.
I'll give you a motion as printed.
As printed, thank you. Anybody second? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, thank you. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Vale?
Richard covered everything in his summation of the report, and everything is in there. I think it's all good to go.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Reilly? You're good? Okay, we got some questions. I got Councillor Elmsley and Ashmore. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to see this GMS start forward. I was wondering either to Richard or Leah, during deliberations with the secondary plan in front of the LPAT, there was information brought forward by some of the I'll call them complainants, which had a lot of information that may fit into the growth management study, and I wondered if we were going to tap into that information and use it rather than reinvent the wheel.
Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor. Certainly anyone that has any requests through the GMS, now's the appropriate time. I know that a number of people had wanted to use specific policies under the growth plan to look at growth expansions. Our position was that that's really a better time and better money and effort spent through the GMS. So the GMS is now the time for all those different interests to come forward.
You good, Councillor Elmsley? Okay, Councillor Ashmore and then Yo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Acting Director Holly. We've talked about this before, and I think it probably relates to this growth management strategy, but how is the provincial policy statement going to mesh with this? Like we've discussed, for example, communities outside of urban areas that want to increase their size, but they can't because of this provincial policy statement. So if we want to do something different, the province says we can't do it. So are we going to have more autonomy now as a municipality instead of having to, get down on our bag for exemptions from the provincial government? We always have to go to them for permission to grow in a certain area. Will this maybe change that and give us some more power to do things on our own?
Through the mayor to Councillor Ashmore, this GMS is really what it's doing. It's implementing the growth numbers that have been given to us through the growth plan. The province will be involved at a number of touch points when we're developing this GMS. So we want to ensure that we're developing it in accordance with their methodology, and we will be consulting with them at various points so that they know what we're doing and they're on board with our strategy and our approach on this. The GMS in itself doesn't really change the provincial policy. All it's really doing is implementing it.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Yo, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions, and this needs simple answers. First question is, given the workload that's going on with the secondary plan and stuff, does this have to be done right now? And two, how long is it going to take?
Through the mayor to Councillor Yo, yes, it's important that this work start because we have timelines under the growth plan that we have to hit. So this is a really important piece that we need to start working on. And it is, to answer the second question, it's anticipated to be a 2-year timeframe.
Okay, I'm seeing a nod. I think he's good. Any other questions on the report? Motion is as printed. Call the question. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. And we'll move into our last report, which is pool covers. Richard's going to stay with us. Do you want to give us the 30-second update on the pool covers? Richard, go ahead.
Certainly. So this report responds to a request that came from Councillor Yo in February to have staff look at lockable protective pool covers as an alternative to pool fencing. We do have an existing pool fencing bylaw, which specifies the types of enclosures around private swimming pools. The purpose of the bylaw is to ensure that pools are operated in a safe manner. There are a lot of different types of pool covers out there. They include fencing, protective pool covers, safety nets, and pool alarms. My apologies. So they do come in various different types and formats. So the protective pool covers, they are lightweight bearing covers, rigid and lockable, mechanical, retractable rigid covers. We also have flexible pool covers that stretch across the pool and they're anchored to the pool deck. These are traditionally used over winter, but they can be used year-round if the owner is diligent and operates them properly. Similarly, safety nets, they also offer another alternative. Essentially, when we did our review, all of the different protective devices have their advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, pool covers, whether they're hard or soft, are protective when they're on the pool. One of the concerns that staff have is the risk of human operation on them. Obviously, if they're open and you walk away from the pool and don't put the pool cover back over, there's a risk to human safety. Some of these pool covers, they take some time to open and close. And so when the pool is left open, it's not supervised, that's when there's a problem from a staff perspective. We still feel that fences are inherently safer because they provide a physical barrier around the pool that's there at all times. We do admit that the gate is a bit of a weakness in the system. So you do have to make sure that the latching system is always maintained from time to time. But from that perspective, we still feel that a fencing system is a better system because it provides that certainty around the pool, sort of for year-round protection. When we did our background research, we canvassed a number of Ontario municipalities greater than 50,000 population. Of the 41 that we polled, 24 responses were sent back, and none of them allowed for protective pool covers in lieu of fencing. So we weren't able to find any examples of municipalities that are currently operating those. We also feel that fencing still provides the best solution as a primary means of protection. So from our perspective, we feel that the bylaw should remain as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yo, it was your memo, you brought this forward. Are you, what is your wish? The recommendation is just to receive it, to leave things as they are and forward that to council. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give you a motion to receive and I will, that's all I'll do at this point if I want to, and I'll think about it. If I want to bring it up at council, I will at that time.
Okay, so the
But right
motion,
now, I'll give you a motion to receive.
motion as printed, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Vale. Any questions, comments on the report? Pretty straightforward. Call the question, all in favor? And that's passed. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for putting that, and Suzanne. That's it. We have no memorandums, item 9, and that's it for reports. So I just need a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Yeo and Elmsley, all in favor? We are adjourned, and remind everyone of our special council meeting this time next Tuesday to deal with a couple of presentations, long-term financial plan and the paramedic master plan. Only those 2 items will be dealt with next Tuesday. So have a good evening. Thanks for hanging in there today, and take care. What? No, he's just waving.